Rings of Requiem. Halo X Gundam Seed Saga. == Chapter 0, Prologue, The Convergence. The silence of space was an illusion, one shattered by the chaotic graveyard of metal, glass, and frozen propellant, left in the wake of humanity's latest desperate struggle. Above the shattered remnants of the Foundation's forces, the dust of the battlefield settled. The superweapon Requiem had been silenced, its monstrous threat to the Earth sphere neutralized. The cosmic void was scarred by the fading trails of beam fire and the lingering thermal blooms of nuclear detonations. Amidst the drifting wreckage of ZAFT, Orb, and Foundation warships, a single, magnificent silhouette hung suspended against the backdrop of the stars. The mighty Strike Freedom Gundam. Its stark white, blue, and gold armor gleamed under the distant light of the sun, the crystalline wings of the proud defender radiating a faint, ethereal luminescence. The terrifying energy discharge of the disruptor had cleaved through the enemy's final defenses, obliterating Orphi Lam Tao's madness and saving. But the cost had been immense. Inside the two-seater panoramic cockpit, Kira Yamato exhaled a breath he felt he had been holding for an eternity. His violet eyes, usually soft, were still hardened by the adrenaline of the seed state, the dilated pupils slowly returning to normal. Sweat beaded on his forehead, matting his brown hair. Beside him, Lacus Klein sat in her pilot's suit, her hands gently resting over his on the control yokes. Her presence was a soothing balm against the sharp edges of his exhaustion. "It's over," Kira whispered, his voice hoarse over the open comms. "Yes," Lacus murmured, her tone carrying the heavy weight of sorrow for those lost, but the quiet relief of salvation. "The Requiem is destroyed. The fighting, it is finally over." Around them, the battered Allied fleet began to regroup. The Millennium Asterisk, Compass's state-of-the-art superdreadnought, drifted forward, its positron reflector emitters scorched and smoking. On its bridge, Captain Muru Ramius gripped her console, her uniform disheveled, breathing heavily as she surveyed the tactical map. "All enemy units are either retreating or surrendering," Commander Arthur Trine reported, his voice trembling with a mixture of exhaustion and relief. "Sensors show the Foundation's command structure has completely collapsed." "Send out the signal to regroup," Muru ordered, brushing a stray lock of hair from her face. "Recall all mobile suits. Athrun Shin, report your status." Static crackled over the tight beam before the cool, composed voice of Athrun Zala broke through. His Infinite Justice Gundam type II hovered near the remnants of a destroyed Foundation cruiser, its beam sabers powering down. "Athrun here. Minor damage to the Justice's left manipulator, but combat capable. Awaiting retrieval." A second later, Shin Asuka's voice practically shouted over the channel, raw with lingering battle fury. "Destiny Spec II is green. We did it, Captain. We completely smashed them." Kira allowed himself a faint smile, his hands moving to power down the mighty Strike Freedom's primary weapon systems. He glanced at the power gauges. The colossal energy output of the proud Defender's fusion with the Freedom had stressed the reactor to its limits. "Millennium Asterisk, this is Kira. We are." A sharp, violent screech of static severed the transmission. In the cockpit of the mighty Strike Freedom, the panoramic monitors violently distorted. Crimson warning klaxons flared to life, casting harsh red light across Kira and Lacus's faces. The high-pitched whine of the nuclear reactor began to spike erratically. "Kira," Lacus gasped, gripping the armrests. "What's happening? I didn't touch anything." Kira's hands blurred across the console, trying to stabilize the operating system. "Reactor output is surging. Phase shift armor is fluctuating." On the bridge of the Millennium Asterisk, the main tactical display dissolved into a sea of static. Albert Heinlein, the ship's chief engineer, practically threw himself at his terminal. "Captain, massive spatial distortion detected," Heinlein shouted, adjusting his glasses frantically. "It's not a mirage colloid effect or a nuclear pulse. The quantum field in Sector 4 is collapsing in on itself." "Source?" Muru demanded. It's the residual energy from the mighty Strike Freedom's disruptor," Heinlein yelled, his voice cracking. "The shear density of the particles is reacting with the vacuum. It's creating a localized dimensional shear. Space is literally tearing open." Outside, the space surrounding the mighty Strike Freedom began to warp. A vortex of blinding, iridescent light, violet, blue, and searing white spiraled outward. The gravitational pull was instantaneous and overwhelming. "Kira, get out of there!" Athrun yelled over the cracking comms, slamming the Infinite Justice's thrusters to maximum, trying to reach his friend. Shin's destiny ignited its wings of light, streaking toward the epicenter. I can't break free. Kira gritted his teeth, the G-forces suddenly crushing him against his seat. The gravity well is too strong, main thrusters are unresponsive. The anomaly expanded exponentially, swallowing the debris field. The Millennium, alongside a dozen surviving Orb and ZAFT escort cruisers, was caught in the event horizon. The colossal superdreadnought groaned as the hull was subjected to immense torsion. Emergency bulkheads closed, Muru screamed. Brace for impact. The vortex erupted. A flash of light, brighter than a supernova, consumed the mighty Strike Freedom, the Millennium Asterisk, the Infinite Justice, the Destiny, and the entire Allied vanguard. Then there was only blackness. Light years away, in a universe utterly alien to the cosmic era, the cold, unforgiving vacuum of space was torn apart by a violent tear in reality. It was not the elegant, catastrophic quantum collapse of the Earth's sphere. This was a slipspace rupture, a jagged, Cherenkov blue hole punched through the fabric of the universe. From the rupture, a colossal Covenant assault carrier, the Solemn Penance, erupted into real space. Its sleek, bulbous, purple hull was scorched, fleeing the catastrophic battle of Earth. In its wake, a much smaller, angular gray vessel shot out of the collapsing portal, riding the carrier's slipstream like a remora on a shark. The UNSC in amber clad. On the bridge of the Paris-class heavy frigate, the atmosphere was a pressure cooker of tension. Commander Miranda Keyes stood at the central holotable, her eyes fixed on the forward viewport as the swirling blue energies of slipspace faded, revealing the starfield. Report, Keyes barked. Slipspace drive powering down, the navigation officer replied, his hands flying over the readouts. We're back in real space. The Covenant carrier is holding position. Sergeant Major Avery Johnson stepped up beside Keyes, his trademark cigar unlit, his assault rifle resting casually but dangerously across his chest. He peered through the viewport. Where'd the bastards take us? Before Keyes could answer, the bridge's AI holotank flickered to life. The blue, holographic avatar of Cortana materialized, her digital form glowing with a mix of processing power and anxiety. Commander, Cortana said, her voice laced with an unusual edge of awe. You're going to want to see this. The forward blast shields retracted fully. The starfield shifted, revealing an immense, impossible structure hanging in the void. It was a ring, a world built as a massive hoop, spinning silently in the shadow of a colossal gas giant. The inner surface was painted with oceans, continents, and cloud coverage, while the outer shell was a network of cold, forerunner metal. Another halo, Keyes breathed, the blood draining from her face. Johnson tightened his grip on his rifle. Say what? Down in the ship's armory, standing like a monolith of green titanium and resolve, Master Chief Petty Officer John 117 watched the feed through his HUD. He said nothing. The weight of his assault rifle in his hands felt heavier, the memories of Installation 4 rushing back in a torrent of flood spores and glassed earth. Cortana, Keyes said, her voice stealing. What's the prophet of regret doing? The carrier is deploying phantoms and boarding craft towards the ring's surface, Cortana analyzed, her data streams scrolling rapidly. But Commander, something is wrong. The slipspace wake. It's not closing. Keyes frowned. What do you mean it's not closing? Regret's jump was hasty, uncalculated, Cortana explained, her avatar flashing yellow. But the rupture isn't just destabilizing, it's changing frequency. I'm reading massive spikes in unknown particle radiation. It's tearing the slipstream wide open. Outside the amber clad, the fading blue slipspace portal suddenly shifted violently. The azure light turned a blinding, radioactive violet. Spatial lightning arced across the void, striking the shields of the Covenant carrier and the hull of the UNSC frigate. Evasive maneuvers, Keyes yelled as the deck pitched. From the violet vortex, a colossal wave of energy burst forth, followed immediately by massive physical objects hurtling into real space. Alarms screamed across the in amber-clad asterisk bridge. Multiple contacts emerging from the anomaly, the tactical officer shouted over the din. Vessel profiles, unrecognized. They don't match UNSC or Covenant signatures. Cortana's avatar turned a deep, alert crimson. Commander, I am tracking one massive warship, Dreadnought class, alongside a dozen escort vessels. But that's not all. I'm reading dozens of smaller mechanized units. They're humanoid. Humanoid, Johnson raised an eyebrow. Like big mechs. 18 meters tall on average, heavily armed, and outputting energy signatures that are off the charts, Cortana confirmed, projecting a tactical map onto the holotable. Outside, the Millennium breached the dimensional tier, its massive thrusters flaring as the crew desperately tried to stabilize their spin. Around it, the Archangel *S surviving escorts, along with several ZAFT Nazca-class destroyers and Orb Aegis-class cruisers, materialized in a chaotic defensive formation. Between the two fleets, the newly arrived Compass forces and the bewildered UNSC and Covenant vessels hung the mobile suits. The mighty Strike Freedom stabilized its descent, its golden joints flaring as it arrested its momentum. Flanking it, the Infinite Justice Type II and the Destiny Spec II raised their weapons, their sensors sweeping the entirely alien battlefield. Inside the Millennium, the bridge was a cacophony of damage reports and sensor warnings. "We're out. The spatial distortion has collapsed." Heinlein reported, gripping his console. Muru forced herself to stand, ignoring the pain in her shoulder. "Where are we? Are we still in Earth orbit?" "Negative, Captain," Arthur stammered, staring at his monitor in disbelief. "Stellar constellations do not match any known database. And Captain, look at the visual feed." The main screen switched from tactical to visual. The breath caught in Muru's throat. Hanging before them was the Halo ring, massive and ancient. And drifting between them and the ring were ships unlike anything ever designed by the Earth Alliance, ZAFT or Orb. One was a sleek, gray, blocky frigate, primitive in its thruster design but heavily armored. The other was a colossal, bulbous, purple leviathan that looked more organic than mechanical. "Identify those vessels," Muru ordered. "ICA." "IFF is completely blank," Marin Hawk called out from the communications station. "They aren't broadcasting any known frequencies. But Captain, the purple ship's weapon systems are powering up." Aboard the Covenant assault carrier Solemn Penance *, the Sanghili shipmaster stared at his holotank in utter confusion and rising fury. "Shipmaster," a minor elite hissed, his mandibles clacking. "Unknown vessels have breached the holy slipstream. They position themselves between us and the sacred ring." "Heretics," the shipmaster growled, his eyes narrowing at the holographic projections of the sleek white super dreadnought and the winged humanoid machines. "Or Forerunner Guardians. They broadcast no Covenant frequency. They do not bear the marks of the prophets." "Then they are an obstacle on the great journey," the shipmaster roared. "Charge the plasma torpedoes, cleanse them from the holy airspace." Back in the cockpit of the mighty Strike Freedom, Kira Yamato's OS finally rebooted, instantly flooding his screen with threat warnings. Red reticles locked onto the purple Covenant carrier as its lateral lines began to glow with superheated plasma. "Kira," Lacus said softly, her eyes wide as she looked at the ringworld, but her voice tense. "That ship, I feel such intense hostility from it." "They're targeting us," Kira said, his hands tightening on the controls. He shifted his gaze to the gray, blocky ship in amber clad. "But that other ship, it's holding fire. It looks human." "Kira, what do we do?" Athran's voice crackled over the lasercom link. "I have a lock on the purple vessel. Their energy output is massive." "Hold your fire, Athran. Shin, defensive formation around the Millennium," Kira ordered, his voice echoing with the authority of Compass's leading commander. "We don't know who they are or where we are. We only fire if fired upon." Aboard the amber clad, Master Chief stood in the launch bay, looking through the reinforced glass of the exterior viewport. Cortana's voice echoed in his helmet. "Chief, I'm routing the visual of their lead unit to your HUD." John's visor flickered, the image magnified, cutting through the void to focus on the white, blue, and gold machine. It was bipedal, incredibly sleek, carrying an array of weaponry that looked both elegant and devastatingly powerful. But what caught John's attention were the wings, crystalline, glowing with an immense, suppressed energy that defied standard physics. "It's not Covenant," John stated, his deep, gravely voice breaking his silence. "And it's definitely not UNSC," Cortana added. "But my thermal scans are picking up biological lifeforms inside those mechs. Human lifeforms, Chief." Key's voice broke over the comms. "Chief, the Covenant carrier is charging weapons. The unknown fleet is raising energy shields, shields I've never seen before. It's a standoff." Master Chief narrowed his eyes beneath his golden visor. watching the mighty strike Freedom hover silently against the backdrop of the Halo ring. Two universes, torn from their moorings, had just collided on the edge of the galaxy's greatest weapon. Cortana, Chief said, raising his assault rifle. Get me a pelican. The void held its breath, the silence stretching taut like a tripwire. On one side, the hardened veterans of the Human Covenant War. On the other, the battle-weary survivors of the Cosmic Era. And below them both, the ancient, sleeping terror of Installation 5 waited to be awakened. The convergence had begun. Chapter 1: Ghosts in the Void. The violent spatial shear that had deposited the allied fleets of the Earth sphere into the shadow of the colossal ringworld left a profound, unnatural silence in its wake. There was no crackle of residual mirage colloid gas, no familiar hum of the Earth's magnetic field against their sensors. The void here felt older, colder, and utterly indifferent. Inside the cockpit of the mighty Strike Freedom, the panoramic displays flickered as the operating system struggled to parse the deluge of alien telemetry. Kira Yamato's hands moved with practiced, blinding speed, resetting the primary avionics and realigning the optical sensors. The phase shift armor hummed, drawing heavily from the ultra-compact nuclear fusion reactor, which had restabilized after the catastrophic drain of the proud Defender's blast. Lacus, Kira said, his voice steady but laced with a quiet tension. Are you hurt? Lacus Klein released a long, trembling breath, her hands lifting from the secondary consoles. I am unharmed, Kira, but the instrumentation it is completely erratic. We are no longer in the Earth sphere. The background radiation, the stellar constellations, nothing aligns with any known database. Outside, the imposing silhouette of the halo ring stretched across the heavens, a ribbon of impossible engineering curving upward into infinity. Beneath it, the Millennium drifted, its heavily armored hull scarred from the Battle of Requiem but structurally intact. Surrounding it in a loose, disorientated defensive formation were the surviving Orb Asterisk Izumo Asterisk-class cruisers and ZAFT Nazca Asterisk-class destroyers that had been caught in the singularity. But they were not alone. Kira, Athran Zala's voice cut through the lasercom link, sharp and deeply pragmatic. The Infinite Justice type II hovered into Kira's peripheral vision, its beam rifle trained downward toward the unknown gray vessel. Have you identified them? No, Kira replied, narrowing his eyes at the tactical display. Their IFF is blank, but look at the vessel design. It lacks laminated armor or beam-deflective coating. It looks like it relies entirely on kinetic weaponry and thick titanium plating. It's primitive yet massive. I wouldn't call it primitive, Mu Laflaga chimed in, the golden Akatsuki drifting into a flanking position above the Millennium. Look at those thruster banks. And that giant barrel running through the center of the ship's spine. That's a mass driver of some kind. If that thing hits you, phase shift or not, you're going to feel it. I don't like this. It feels like we've just walked into someone else's firing line. Captain Ramius to all mobile suits, Muru's voice crackled over the secure channel. Hold your positions and maintain a defensive perimeter. Do not engage unless fired upon. We are currently trying to establish a quantum link with the rest of the fleet. Aboard the Orb flagship that had been dragged into the anomaly, Chief Representative Kagali Eula Atha stood on the bridge, her amber eyes fixed fiercely on the holographic projection of the ringworld. Her hands gripped the command console. Damage report, Kagali demanded, her voice cutting through the panic of the Orb crew. Minor structural torsion, ma'am, but life support and propulsion are green, the Chief Tactical Officer reported. But Representative Atha, we've lost contact with Earth. Completely. We are picking up heavy thermal and electromagnetic readings from the massive purple vessel ahead of us, and the smaller gray one. Keep our weapon systems offline, but leave the deflector shields at maximum, Kagali ordered, her mind racing. She could not afford a political or military blunder when the lives of her citizens and soldiers were already hanging by a thread. If they are a new faction, or if we have somehow been displaced to another star system, we cannot afford to provoke a war. Focus on fleet cohesion. Kagali is right, Lacus murmured softly over the shared command channel, her political instincts instantly taking over. The purple vessel feels angry, hostile, but the gray ship is merely observing us. We must approach this with extreme caution. Tell that to the guys aiming their guns at us, Shin Asuka snapped. The Destiny Spec II shifted aggressively, its crimson wings of light flaring momentarily as it orientated toward the asterisk in amber clad. They're tracking us. I can feel their targeting lasers painting my armor. Shin, stand down, Athron barked. Discipline, you will not fire the first shot. Shin gritted his teeth, his grip tightening on the control yokes. I'm just saying, if they try anything, I'm going to smash them. Aboard the UNSC in amber clad, the atmosphere was a pressure cooker of shock, discipline, and profound disbelief. Commander Miranda Keyes stood at the holodable, her eyes darting between the tactical readouts and the visual feed of the towering, humanoid machines drifting outside her ship. The Paris-class frigate was heavily outgunned. The Covenant assault carrier alone was a death sentence. But this new fleet, sleek, white, and bristling with unknown energy signatures, was a complete anomaly. Cortana, give me something, Keyes ordered, her tone clipped. Are they Covenant, a Forerunner security protocol? Cortana's holographic avatar paced rapidly across the projector table, her digital form flashing with streams of raw code. Neither, Commander. The metallurgical composition of their hulls doesn't match Covenant nanolaminates or Forerunner alloys. It's a titanium ceramic composite, but the molecular structure is incredibly dense. And those mechs, Commander, they aren't drones. Sergeant Major Johnson leaned closer to the holotank, chewing on the end of his cigar. You telling me there are little green men inside those things? Not green, Sergeant, Cortana replied, stopping to look up at Keyes. My thermal sensors and bioscanners are penetrating their cockpits. They're human. The vital signs, the respiratory rates, the thermal outlines, they are entirely baseline human. A heavy silence fell over the bridge. Human, Keyes repeated, her brow furrowing. Insurrectionists with technology like that. Impossible, Cortana stated flatly. Commander, I am reading energy outputs from those mechs that defy standard physics. Their reactors are ultra-compact nuclear fusion, but they are bleeding off exotic particles I have no classification for. A single one of those machines possesses the firepower of a UNSC heavy cruiser. And the large white ship in the center, it has energy shielding. Real energy shielding, not just magnetic deflectors. Down in the hangar bay, Master Chief Petty Officer John 117 watched the feed silently. He stood perfectly still, his MJOLNIR armor a testament to the peak of UNSC military engineering. Yet, as he watched the white, blue, and gold machine, the one with the glowing crystalline wings, he recognized a predator when he saw one. Chief, Cortana's voice whispered privately in his helmet. Look at their thruster arrays. They move in a vacuum with the agility of atmospheric fighters. The Covenant rely on brute force and plasma. These things are built for precision kinetic and energy warfare. Are they hostile? John asked, his voice a low, gravelly rumble. Unknown, but they are deploying into a defensive sphere. They're protecting that massive white dreadnought. Commander Keyes, the tactical officer suddenly called out, his voice cracking slightly. Debris from the slipspace rupture is drifting into our flight path, evasive thrusters firing automatically to compensate. The in amber clad shifted sharply to port to avoid a massive chunk of sheared Forerunner metal dragged in from the anomaly. The sudden movement caused the frigate's automated point defense turrets and Archer missile pods to slew around, tracking the nearest moving targets to re-establish a defensive baseline. Those targets were the mobile suits. In the cockpit of the Destiny Spec II, the threat warning klaxons suddenly shrieked. A harsh, high-pitched mechanical whine filled the cockpit as red targeting reticles flashed across Shin's screen. They're locking on, Shin yelled, adrenaline flooding his system. The Destiny's high-energy beam rifle snapped upward, aiming directly at the bridge of the in amber clad. Shin, wait, Kira shouted. The tension was already at a breaking point. Aboard an Orb Aegis class cruiser, an automated CIWS phalanx system, reacting to the UNSC frigate's targeting lasers, spun up with a terrifying mechanical roar. Orb vessel, power down your weapons immediately, Cagali screamed over the fleet comms. On the asterisk in amber clad, alarms blared. Missile pods have established hard locks on the humanoid targets, the UNSC weapons officer shouted. They're raising weapons. Belay that, break the locks, disengage, Keyes roared, slamming her fist on the holodable. Do not fire. Before the UNSC systems could fully disengage, the mighty Strike Freedom moved. To the eyes of the UNSC bridge crew, the machine simply vanished. It reappeared a fraction of a second later in the dead center of the space between the amber-clad and the Destiny Spec II, a trail of golden afterimages fading in its wake. The sheer acceleration was incomprehensible. Kira threw the mighty Strike Freedom's arms outward, placing its armored bulk squarely in the line of fire of both sides. He did not raise his weapons. Instead, the golden joints of the Gundam glowed brightly, projecting an aura of absolute, immovable authority. Shin, lower your weapon, Kira commanded, his voice cold, projecting the absolute focus of the seed state. They moved to avoid debris. It was an automated tracking response. If you fire, you will start a war we do not understand. Shin breathed heavily, his finger hovering over the trigger. Slowly, reluctantly, he lowered the beam rifle. Understood. Master Chief watched the display from the hangar, his grip on his assault rifle tightening. The speed of the white machine was staggering. It had crossed 3 kilometers of vacuum in the blink of an eye. If that came to close-quarters combat, even a Spartan would be hard-pressed to track it. They stood down, Cortana said, a hint of relief in her usually confident voice. The white machine intercepted its own ally. They have discipline, Keyes observed, her heart hammering against her ribs. They're a regular military. Cortana, broadcast on all standard UNSC, emergency, and unencrypted frequencies. Audio only. Let's find out who the hell we're looking at. Aboard the Millennium Marin Hawk's console lit up with a barrage of incoming signals. Captain, we're receiving a transmission from the gray ship, Marin reported, her eyes widening. It's unencrypted radio waves, analog and digital formats, and it's in English. Murrow exchanged a stunned look with Arthur. Put it through. Static hissed over the bridge speakers, before resolving into a clear, authoritative female voice. Unknown Fleet, this is Commander Miranda Keyes of the United Nations Space Command frigate in amber-clad. You have entered a highly volatile combat zone. Identify yourselves, your allegiance, and your intentions immediately, or you will be considered hostile. The bridge of the Millennium fell dead silent. In the mighty Strike Freedom, Lacus covered her mouth with her hands. United Nations Space Command. Kira, there has been no United Nations on Earth since the Reconstruction War. They speak English, Athrun muttered over the comms. But their terminology, their ship designs, it's like looking at a ghost from a divergent timeline. Captain, Lacus transmitted, her voice instantly adopting the calm, resonant tone of a seasoned political leader. Allow me to answer. Lacus keyed the open frequency, her voice carrying across the void to the UNSC frigate. Commander Keyes, I am President Lacus Klein of the global peacekeeping organization Compass, operating in conjunction with the Orb Union and ZAFT forces. We have suffered a catastrophic dimensional anomaly. We do not know where we are, and we hold no hostile intentions toward you. We request immediate dialogue and a ceasefire. Aboard the in amber-clad, Johnson lowered his cigar, his jaw slightly slack. Compass, ZAFT, Orb Union, Keyes repeated, looking at Cortana. Are those insurrectionist factions? Negative, Commander, Cortana replied, her avatar glowing a deep, contemplative blue. I've cross-referenced every colonial database, every historical archive dating back to the 21st century. Those nations, those acronyms, they do not exist. But their linguistic syntax, their vocal biometrics, they are distinctly, undeniably human. Earth descended. How can an entire fleet of humans with technology centuries ahead of ours just pop out of nowhere and not exist? Johnson asked. Before Keyes could answer, a deep, guttural, and terrifyingly familiar alarm began to wail across the bridge. The lights flickered as immense radiation spiked on the sensors. Commander, Cortana shouted, her avatar flashing a brilliant, warning crimson. Energy spikes detected from the Covenant assault carrier. They're opening their plasma bays. Aboard the solemn Penance Asterisk, the Sanghili shipmaster glared at the tactical holotank. The transmission had been intercepted. He had heard the voices of the humans. They speak with the vermin, the shipmaster snarled, his mandibles flaring in absolute disgust. The unknown machines are not forerunner relics. They are constructs of the demons. They have come to defile the sacred ring. Shipmaster, their energy readings. I care not for their blasphemous fire, the shipmaster roared. Cleanse the void, fire the plasma torpedoes, launch the seraphs, let none of them set foot upon the holy rings. Kira, Lacus gasped, the phase shift armor humming violently as the Gundam sensors went wild. I see it, Kira yelled. On the tactical map, the bulbous, purple Leviathan had suddenly erupted with activity. Massive lateral bays opened, and searing, superheated spheres of crimson and violet plasma burst forth, trailing highly charged magnetic wakes. They were not targeting the in amber clad alone, they were firing a widespread volley aimed directly at the heart of the Compass and Orb fleets. At the same time, swarms of teardrop-shaped fighter craft, Covenant Seraphs, poured out of the carrier's belly like a hive of enraged hornets, moving with terrifying speed. All ships brace for impact. Raise positron reflectors, Muru screamed. Mobile suits intercept those fighters, protect the fleet. Finally, Shin roared, the Destiny Spec II rocketing forward, its beam boomerang igniting. Shin, stay in formation, Athron commanded, his justice transforming into a streak of crimson light as he moved to intercept the plasma torpedoes. From the hangar of the in amber clad, Master Chief watched the alien plasma tear through the void, aimed at the newly arrived human fleet. He saw the white Gundam, the mighty Strike Freedom, draw two massive beam sabers, its crystalline wings erupting with a brilliant, blinding light as it charged headlong toward the Covenant swarm. The humans of the cosmic era had just realized what the UNSC had known for decades. In this universe, humanity was already fighting for its life against an empire of monsters, and the war had just found them. Chapter 2: Phantoms of the Ring. The void above Installation 5 burned with the violent birth and sudden death of Covenant plasma. As the superheated crimson and violet torpedoes surged toward the Millennium and the Orb fleet, the mighty Strike Freedom moved. It did not evade, it intercepted. Kira Yamato's hands blurred across his panoramic consoles, his violet eyes locking onto the trajectory of the incoming fire. From the Gundam's abdomen, the high-energy beam cannon erupted, while its twin beam rifles fired in rapid, surgical succession. The concentrated antimatter particle beams struck the plasma torpedoes mid-flight. The resulting detonations painted the vacuum in a blinding, radioactive corona. Shin Asuka's Destiny Spec II and Athron Zala's Infinite Justice Type II flanked the explosions, their beam boomerangs and shield-mounted sabers slicing effortlessly through the vanguard of Covenant Seraphs that had dared to cross the engagement line. Aboard the Covenant assault carrier Solemn Penance Asterisk, the Sanghili shipmaster watched his holotank in stunned, horrified silence. The unknown white machine had not merely destroyed the plasma volley, it had outmaneuvered it with an acceleration that defied gravitational physics, its crystalline wings shedding golden particles like a divine messenger of death. Pull the fighters back, the shipmaster bellowed, his mandibles flaring in a mix of rage and sudden, profound caution. Hold position in the shadow of the gas giant. These are no mere human machines. Their energy shielding and beam weaponry, it rivals the holy dreadnoughts. We must consult the prophet. As the massive purple Leviathan engaged its repulsor engines and slowly retreated into the darker orbit of substance, a tense, suffocating stalemate settled over the anomaly zone. Aboard the UNSC in amber-clad, the bridge was utterly silent. Commander Miranda Keyes stared at the fading thermal blooms on the tactical display. Beside her, Sergeant Major Johnson chewed thoughtfully on his unlit cigar, his eyes narrowed. Cortana, Keyes said, her voice barely a whisper. Did you just see what I saw? Cortana's holographic avatar materialized on the central table, her digital form flashing with intense processing cycles. I recorded every millisecond of it, Commander, and I am struggling to classify it. Their point defense wasn't magnetic or kinetic. It was directed particle beam weaponry, highly concentrated, incredibly efficient, and their armor. It took the splash damage from a plasma torpedo without melting, Johnson finished, leaning forward. Titanium doesn't do that. It's not just titanium, Cortana explained, projecting a wireframe schematic of the mighty Strike Freedom derived from her sensor sweeps. When the plasma detonated, the armor on that white machine shifted its energy frequency. It's some form of phase-shifting technology. It actively distributes kinetic and thermal shock across the entire chassis using electrical currents. But what is truly terrifying is the power source. Explain, Keyes ordered, folding her arms. They are nuclear-powered, Commander, but the reactors are ultra-compact, small enough to fit inside a humanoid chassis, and they are outputting energy on par with a UNSC heavy cruiser. To accelerate at those speeds without crushing the pilot to jelly, They must be using some form of inertial dampening that we haven't even conceptualized. Master Chief John 117 stepped forward from the shadows of the comms station, his towering MJOLNIR armor gleaming faintly in the bridge lights. Are they Covenant? No, Chief, Cortana replied, looking directly at the Spartan. Their communication protocols, their vocal patterns, their ship designs, it is entirely human. But their historical databases, which I am currently trying to passively scrape from their unencrypted tight beams, mention nations that do not exist. Orb, ZAFT, the Earth Alliance. It is as if an entire alternate timeline of humanity just fell out of slipspace. I don't care if they're from the moon, Johnson grunted. They just chased off a couple of giant robots by throwing a couple of giant robots at it. I say we buy them a drink. Not until we know exactly who we are dealing with, Keyes said firmly. Cortana, reopen the comm link. Audio and visual. Let's look these people in the eye. On the bridge of the Millennium Asterisk, the main display flickered, replacing the tactical view of the retreating Covenant carrier with the interior of the UNSC frigate. Muru Ramius, Marin Hawk, and Arthur Trine stared in quiet shock. The bridge on the screen looked distinctly human, but purely utilitarian. There were no sleek holographic interfaces or contoured command chairs. It was a room built entirely for function, clad in gray metal and populated by officers in olive drab uniforms that looked centuries out of date. Standing at the center was a young woman with short brown hair, wearing a gray naval uniform. Behind her stood a dark-skinned soldier gripping a primitive-looking projectile rifle, and an imposing, massive figure encased entirely in olive-green armor with a reflective gold visor. Lacus Klein stood near the Millennium's primary console, her posture regal but approachable, her expression a mask of diplomatic calm. President Klein, Commander Keyes spoke, her voice echoing over the bridge. I am Commander Keyes of the UNSC. We witnessed your engagement with the Covenant. While we appreciate the intervention, your presence here is a massive tactical variable. We need to understand your origin. Earth has no record of a compass or an orb union. Lacus gently rested her hands on the terminal. Commander Keyes, we find ourselves equally bewildered. According to our navigational data, the star systems match our galaxy, but the political and historical realities you describe are entirely alien to us. We belong to the cosmic era. We were engaged in a conflict within the Earth sphere when a dimensional anomaly enveloped our fleet. Keyes' eyes narrowed slightly on the screen. Dimensional anomaly, you're telling me you're from another universe. It is the only logical conclusion our engineers can draw, Lacus replied softly. But regardless of our origins, it is clear we are both human, and it is clear that the alien vessel that just attacked us is a mutual threat. We seek no conflict with your United Nations Space Command. On the UNSC side, Chief's gaze shifted to Lacus. Her presence, her manner of speaking, it reminded him of the aristocratic politicians of the inner colonies, yet there was a hardened, sorrowful edge to her voice that only came from experiencing total war. The Covenant is more than a threat, President Klein, Keyes said, her tone grim. They are a collective of alien species bent on the complete genocide of humanity, and the ringworld you are currently hovering above is Installation 5. A Forerunner construct. We believe it is a weapon of unimaginable power. We cannot allow the Covenant to secure it. A weapon, Muru whispered, stepping forward. She looked out the viewport at the massive, curving landscape of Delta Halo. The thought of a superweapon that size made the Requiem look like a child's toy. We need to ascertain the state of our fleet and repair our damages, Lacus said. But we must also understand the environment we have been cast into. I am authorizing a reconnaissance mission into the ring's atmosphere. We are doing the same, Keyes replied. I suggest our forces maintain a wide berth to avoid misunderstandings. UNSC out. The channel cut. Captain, Albert Heinlein said from the engineering station, his glasses reflecting the light of his monitors. I strongly advise against sending our forces into that structure's gravity well. The engineering required to maintain a breathable atmosphere on a ring in a vacuum defies all known thermodynamics. We have to know what's down there, Heinlein, Muru said, her expression hardening. If the Covenant want it and this UNSC fears it, we cannot remain blind. Deploy a recon team. Kira, Athrun, Shin, Luna Maria. Descend into the atmosphere. Passive sensors only. Do not engage the Covenant unless absolutely necessary. The descent was unlike anything the Gundam pilots had ever experienced. As the mighty strike freedom, infinite justice, destiny, and Lunameria's force impulse broke through the artificial cloud layer of Delta Halo, the true, terrifying scale of the Forerunner megastructure revealed itself. It was not a curved horizon. The land swept upwards. Oceans of deep blue water crashed against metallic shorelines. Dense, emerald green forests stretched for hundreds of miles, interrupted only by massive, impossibly sheer cliffs of geometric gray metal. The sky was an artificial azure, backlit by the distant glow of the gas giant substance, which dominated the center of the ring's immense arch. "This is unbelievable," Lunameria breathed over the comms, the force impulse's cameras panning wildly. "Look at the curvature. It's an entire planetary ecosystem wrapped around a halo. How is the water not spilling into space?" "Centrifugal force and artificial gravity," Athron replied, his voice tight. The infinite justice flew in a wedge formation behind Kira. But the energy required to maintain the tectonic stability of a structure this large, it's godlike. Whoever built this had an understanding of the universe that makes ZAFT look primitive. Inside the cockpit of the mighty Strike Freedom, Kira stared silently at the landscape rushing past below them. The seed within him, the heightened spatial awareness that made him the ultimate coordinator, was screaming. It wasn't a warning of an immediate attack. It was a profound, suffocating sense of wrongness. "Kira, are you all right?" Athron asked, noticing the slight drift in the Freedom's flight path. "There's no life," Kira whispered. "What do you mean?" Shin asked, the Destiny banking sharply to scan a sprawling metallic canyon. "Look at the forests. It's entirely green." "Plant life, yes," Kira said, his hands tightening on the controls. "But look at the thermal scans. No fauna, no animals, no birds, no insects. An ecosystem this dense should be teeming with biological signatures. It's completely sterile. It's a terrarium." As they flew deeper into the ring's topography, the verdant forests gave way to a massive, frozen tundra. Jagged spires of gray Forerunner metal pierced the ice like the ribs of a dead leviathan. "I'm picking up massive energy readings dead ahead," Lunameria reported, her radar systems pinging. "It's not Covenant. It matches the ambient frequency of the ring itself." "Approaching cautiously," Kira ordered. The four mobile suits crested a massive, snow-covered ridge. Below them lay a sprawling Forerunner facility. It was a brutalist masterpiece of cold, angular architecture, sinking deep into a massive chasm. But unlike the pristine, untouched metallic structures they had seen elsewhere, this facility looked battered. Meanwhile, high above in the cold void, the Sanghili shipmaster stood in the command center of his carrier. "The human machines have descended into the holy atmosphere," the sensor operator reported. "And the vermin frigate. They have deployed their dropships to a different sector. They remain separated." The shipmaster narrowed his eyes. The prophets had commanded that the great journey must begin here. The presence of the white-winged machine deeply unsettled him, but his faith demanded action. "Deploy the phantoms," the shipmaster commanded. "Shadow the human mechs. Do not engage unless they attempt to defile the sacred ruins. We must learn if they bleed like the rest of their kind." Back on Delta Halo, the Gundam team hovered before the massive Forerunner structure. "This isn't a city," Athron noted, his optical sensors zooming in on the immense, 50-meter-thick blast doors that sealed the facility's entrance. "Look at the architecture. The defensive embankments face inward, not outward." Shin frowned, bringing the Destiny lower to the ground. "Inward? You mean this place was built to keep something in, not keep attackers out?" "Zin," Lunameria suggested, a shiver running down her spine. Kira brought the mighty Strike Freedom down to the snow-covered surface, its massive feet touching the ancient metal walkway leading to the doors. He engaged the external microphones. The wind howled, but beneath it, there was a low, resonant hum of machinery that had been running for 100,000 years. "Kira, look at the blast doors," Athron said, his voice dropping to a low, tight whisper. Kira magnified the image on his main monitor. The immense titanium alley doors, built to withstand orbital bombardments, were heavily damaged. But the deep, jagged scorch marks and immense physical gouges in the metal were not from weapons fire. They were claw marks. Suddenly, a massive, unencrypted signal blasted across all frequencies. It was not human. It was not Covenant. It was a cold, automated digital voice that instantly overrode the Gundam's comms, translating itself into a chilling sequence of warnings. Warning. Containment protocol breach detected. Quarantine zone compromised. Unregistered biomass detected. Implementing sterilization protocols. In orbit, aboard the Asterisk in amber clad, Cortana's avatar flashed a violent red. "Commander," Cortana shouted, her voice echoing with genuine fear. "I'm intercepting a massive Forerunner broadcast from the ring, and I'm reading thousands, no, millions, of biological signatures suddenly emerging from cryogenic stasis beneath the surface." Master Chief racked the bolt of his battle rifle, his visor reflecting the red emergency lights of the bridge. He knew exactly what that meant. On the surface of Delta Halo, Kira Yamato stared at the massive, scratched blast doors as the ground beneath the mighty Strike Freedom began to violently tremble. The Covenant was no longer their primary concern. The real monsters had just woken up. Chapter 3: The Covenant's Fury. The sanctum of the Prophet of Regret aboard the assault carrier Solemn Penance was bathed in the holy, luminescent violet of Covenant architecture. Yet the air was foul with the stench of blasphemy. Hovering in his gravity throne, the High Prophet stared furiously at the holographic projection of the orbital space above Installation 5. The Holy Ring, the ultimate instrument of the Great Journey, was within their grasp, but its sacred shadow had been defiled. Not only had the human vermin of the UNSC followed them, but another fleet, bearing impossible human signatures and godlike machines, now dared to hover above the Forerunner relic. "Shipmaster," Regret's voice was a reedy, echoing shriek that commanded absolute obedience. "What are these mechanical abominations?" The Sanghili Fleetmaster bowed deeply, his armor clanking. "Excellency," they broadcast human vernacular, yet their technology defies our understanding of the vermin. They possess energy shields and directed light weaponry that rivals our own. Some among the council whisper that they are Forerunner guardians, awakened by our arrival. "Fools, heretics," Regret spat, his withered hands trembling with zealous fury. He pointed a skeletal finger at the projection of the mighty Strike Freedom. "Look at it, it mocks the divine light of the Forerunners. It is a walking heresy, constructed by demons to tempt us from the path. They seek to claim the ring for themselves." The Prophet pressed a sequence on his throne's console. "The great journey waits for no one. I have summoned the remnants of our vanguard fleet from slipspace. Cleanse the void, leave not a single human vessel intact, and melt their blasphemous machines into slag." Outside the Solemn Penance Asterisk, the fabric of space tore open in a cascade of jagged blue Cherenkov radiation. Half a dozen Covenant Asterisk, CCS Asterisk class battlecruisers, and two massive Asterisk CAS Asterisk class assault carriers ruptured into real space, their sleek, purple hulls immediately bristling with weapon emplacements. The extermination protocol had begun. Aboard the UNSC in amber clad, the bridge was bathed in the harsh red light of battle stations. The klaxons wailed in a deafening, rhythmic pulse. "Slipspace ruptures detected, multiple contacts," the tactical officer shouted, his voice cracking under the sudden pressure. "Vessel tonnages match Covenant battlecruisers and carriers. They're flanking our position." Commander Miranda Keyes braced her hands against the holodouble, her jaw set. "Bring the MAC gun online, spool up the capacitors to maximum charge. Archer missile pods, prepare for ripple fire." Cortana's avatar flashed a brilliant, anxious yellow. "Commander, the Covenant fleet isn't just targeting us. They are locking their primary plasma lances onto the unknown human fleet. I am detecting a massive, coordinated multi-vector attack pattern. Orbital saturation strike is imminent." Sergeant Major Johnson racked the slide of his battle rifle, his eyes locked on the tactical screen. "Those fancy new mechs better be as tough as they look, or this is gonna be a real short alliance." "Can we coordinate with them?" Keyes demanded. "Open a secure channel." "I'm trying," Cortana replied, code streams cascading furiously around her holographic form. "But the Covenant are flooding the spectrum with plasma interference. What little I can decipher from the Compass Fleet's comms shows severe Minovsky particle-like jamming. Their IFF tags are scrambling. If we fire into that furball, we risk hitting them." Down in the ship's armory, Master Chief John 117 locked his helmet into place, the golden visor sealing with a sharp hiss of pressurization. Through his HUD, Cortana fed him the tactical overlays. "Chief," Cortana's voice echoed in his ear. "Covenant boarding craft are launching. They're coming for us, and they're heading for the unknown vessels as well. Prepare to repel boarders. Acknowledged, the Master Chief replied, his voice a low, unshakable rumble. He stepped toward the airlock corridors, assault rifle raised, a solitary titan standing against the encroaching tide of the Covenant. In the upper atmosphere of Delta Halo, the Gundam reconnaissance team was already fighting gravity and time. Aborting recon, all units maximum thrust. Ascend, Kira Yamato commanded, his voice tight. The horrifying Forerunner containment warning had barely finished echoing when the sky above them lit up with the blinding flashes of slipspace ruptures. The mighty strike Freedom, Infinite Justice, Destiny, and Force Impulse broke atmospheric entry in a blazing wedge formation, rocketing back into the cold vacuum. Kira, look at the radar, Athran Zala yelled over the comms, the Infinite Justice's sensors overwhelming his panoramic display with hundreds of red hostile indicators. It's a massive fleet. They're surrounding the Millennium and the Orb forces. They're charging heavy energy weapons. Shin Asuka snarled, his eyes dilating as the adrenaline surged. The Destiny Spec, II's crimson wings of light erupted, leaving a massive trail of scattered mirage colloid particles. I'm not letting them touch the Millennium. In the center of the besieged Allied fleet, Captain Muru Ramius gripped her command chair. The positron reflectors of the super dreadnought flared to life, creating a shimmering hexagonal barrier around the ship. Evasive maneuvers. Angle the Tannhäuser to intercept their carriers, Muru ordered. Orb fleet, deploy laminated armor deflector formations. Aboard the Orb flagship, Chief Representative Kagali Yula Atha watched the sheer scale of the Covenant Armada with a sinking heart. Protect the civilian transports. Keep our cruisers tightly grouped. Mew, we need covering fire. Already on it, Princess. Mula Flaga's voice rang out as the golden Akatsuki Gundam launched from the catapult, its dragoon funnels detaching and forming a defensive web of beam fire. But these guys don't fight like ZAFT or the Foundation. Their plasma weapons have a spread that's off the charts. It's like they're trying to glass the entire sector. On the Millennium Bridge, Lacus Klein stood at the comms station, her hands clasped tightly together in a desperate prayer. This is President Lacus Klein to the Covenant forces. We have no desire for war. Please cease your attack. A deafening screech of static cut her off. The Covenant did not respond with words. They responded with fire. Hundreds of Covenant Seraph fighters descended upon the Compass and Orb fleets like a swarm of locusts. Following them were searing, superheated bolts of crimson plasma from the battlecruisers, aimed directly at the human warships. They're here, Shin roared. The Destiny Spec II slammed into the vanguard of the Seraph swarm. He drew the Arendite anti-ship sword, the massive blade igniting with a hum of pure destructive energy. A Covenant fighter attempted to strafe him with plasma fire. Shin dodged with a violent burst of thrusters, swinging the Arendite in a massive arc. The blade struck the Seraph's energy shielding. For a fraction of a second, the alien shield held, then shattered spectacularly as the antimatter edge cleaved the fighter in two, detonating its reactor. Their shields are strong, but focused beam weaponry punches right through. Athran analyzed rapidly, his infinite justice transforming into a flurry of crimson kicks and beam saber strikes, devastating a trio of Covenant interceptors. Aim for concentrated strikes. Don't waste energy on suppressing fire. At the edge of the formation, the UNSC in amber-clad fired its magnetic accelerator cannon. The deafening, physical asterisk crack of the Mach round tearing through the vacuum was felt even through the mobile suit's dampeners. A 600-ton depleted uranium slug traveling at a fraction of the speed of light slammed into the shielding of a Covenant battlecruiser. The shielding flared a brilliant white, buckling under the kinetic force, before the slug ripped through the alien hull, venting atmosphere and purple blood into the void. Target hit, Keyes called out. Reloading Mac, keep those longswords screening our flanks. But the battlefield was descending into utter chaos. The Covenant numbers were staggering. Kira, our comms are breaking down, Athran warned, his voice heavily distorted by static. The plasma interference is disrupting our quantum links. We're losing the IFF signals from the gray UNSC ship. Don't fire near the gray ship, Kira broadcasted blindly, hoping the other pilots could hear him. The mighty strike Freedom hovered above the Millennium, its multi-lock-on system engaging. Kira closed his eyes for a fraction of a second. When they opened, his pupils were dilated, devoid of light. The seed had burst. The proud defender's wings opened to their maximum span. In a blinding flash, a barrage of high-energy beams erupted from the Freedom, intercepting dozens of incoming plasma torpedoes before they could strike the orb cruisers. But even Kira Yamato could not be everywhere. Boarding craft detected, Marin Hawk screamed from the Millennium's bridge. They're heavily shielded. They've bypassed the positron reflectors. Like parasites, dozens of Covenant boarding torpedoes slammed into the hulls of the ZAFT destroyers, the orb cruisers, and the UNSC in amber-clad Asterisk. Thick magnetic clamps locked onto the bulkheads, and the terrifying sound of plasma cutters began to burn through the armor. Inside the UNSC frigate, Master Chief rounded a corner just as the airlock doors blew inward. A hulking Sanghili miner, mandibles roaring, charged through the smoke with a crackling plasma rifle. The chief did not hesitate. He fired a 3-round burst from his battle rifle, stripping the elite's personal shielding, before stepping forward and driving the butt of his weapon into the alien's jaw with bone-shattering force. But behind the elite, half a dozen grunts and a massive hunter pair poured into the corridor. The war had reached the interior. Outside, the space above Delta Halo was a maelstrom of intersecting beam fire, detonating plasma, and shattered titanium. The UNSC MAC lines were struggling to recharge fast enough. The orb fleet was taking severe shield damage, their laminated armor boiling under the sheer heat of the Covenant saturation. They're lining up for a combined strike, Mulaflaga yelled, his Akatsuki darting between two massive plasma beams. The carriers are merging their primary lances. If that hits, it's going to wipe out half the fleet. I won't let them, Shin screamed, pushing the Destiny's reactor to dangerous limits. Shin, fall back, you can't block a capital-grade plasma lance, Athran ordered. Kira moved the mighty Strike Freedom to the front of the human fleets, preparing to use the disruptor, calculating the exact spatial coordinates required to slice the Covenant carriers in half without hitting the ringworld. But before his finger could compress the trigger, the universe seemed to stop. It was not a weapon. It was a sensation. Aboard the amber-clad, Cortana shrieked, a sound of genuine digital agony that spiked directly into Master Chief's neural lace. His HUD violently glitched, flashing a sickly, necrotic green. In the cockpit of the Freedom, Kira gasped, his hands flying off the controls as a wave of profound, suffocating nausea washed over him. The seed state shattered. He felt a presence, ancient, rotting, and hungry, echoing up from the surface of Delta Halo. It was a psychic weight so immense it made the Covenant Armada feel like a collection of insignificant toys. Deep within the ringworld, a pulse of dark, unnatural energy radiated outward, distorting the very gravitational field of the battlefield. The Covenant targeting sensors went blind. The mobile suit's reactors flickered. Kira looked down at the sprawling green continents of Installation 5, a cold sweat breaking across his brow. It's awake, he whispered, the words carrying an unbearable dread. Whatever had been locked behind those blast doors was no longer contained. And it was far, far worse than the Covenant. Chapter 4, Steel and Titanium. The corridor of the UNSC in amber-clad was a slaughterhouse painted in the harsh, flashing crimson of emergency lighting. Master Chief John 117 moved with lethal, terrifying efficiency. A Sanghili miner charged through the breached airlock, energy sword ignited. The Spartan did not step back. He stepped inside the alien's guard, parrying the plasma blade with the reinforced barrel of his battle rifle, before driving his titanium-plated elbow into the elite's mandibles. The energy shield flared and shattered, the alien crumpled. Without breaking stride, the chief smoothly transitioned to his sidearm, executing 3 grunts before they could unholster their plasma pistols. Airlock secured, Chief, Cortana's voice hummed in his helmet, her tone crisp despite the chaos echoing across the ship's network. Automated bulkheads are sealing, but we have a much larger problem outside. On the bridge, Commander Miranda Keyes gripped the edges of the holotable. The orbital space above Delta Halo had devolved into a catastrophic maelstrom. Covenant battlecruisers were systematically attempting to corral the UNSC and unknown human fleets against the gravity well of the ringworld. Mac gun is at 80% charge, the tactical officer shouted. But we're losing our firing windows. The unknown fleet is caught in the crossfire. Their evasive maneuvers are too erratic. They aren't erratic, Commander, Cortana interjected, her avatar materializing in a cascade of blue code. They are operating on a highly advanced, three-dimensional combat doctrine. Their mobile suits are actively intercepting Covenant plasma fire with directed energy blasts. They are acting as a mobile Aegis shield for their capital ships. Keyes narrowed her eyes at the tactical display. The giant humanoid machines were tearing through Covenant Seraph squadrons with terrifying precision. Can we talk to them? I need them out of my Mach trajectory. Their local space is flooded with a highly disruptive particle field of their own making, Cortana explained rapidly. However, it appears to be a byproduct of their reactors, not an intentional jammer. I have isolated their primary carrier wave. I am initiating an algorithmic handshake to sync our targeting telemetry with their lead vessel. Keyes didn't hesitate. Do it. Tell them we have the heavy kinetics, but we need them to cover our flanks. Let's see if steel and titanium can mix. Aboard the Millennium, the bridge was shaking violently under the kinetic splash of near-miss plasma torpedoes. Captain, Marin Hawk called out, her fingers flying across her console. We are receiving a massive data packet burst from the UNSC frigate. It's an automated handshake protocol. They're transmitting their ship's firing vectors, Mach gun recharge cycles, and orbital blind spots. Muru Ramius looked up, her eyes widening in realization. They're sharing their tactical grid. They want us to integrate. It's primitive, Albert Heinlein noted, adjusting his glasses as he skimmed the incoming data. Their targeting systems rely heavily on predicted kinetic trajectories rather than quantum probability, but it is incredibly robust. Their main weapon is a magnetic accelerator cannon, a solid mass driver. If they hit a Covenant vessel with that, energy shielding won't matter. Lacus, Muru said, turning to the Compass president. Lacus nodded firmly, her political acumen instantly grasping the military necessity. Accept the handshake, Marin. Broadcast our defensive perimeter coordinates. We must stand together, or we will all perish separately. Across the battlefield, the encrypted tactical network lit up the cockpits of the Gundam pilots. All Compass and allied ZAFT units, this is Athran Zala, the calm, authoritative voice echoed through the comms. The Infinite Justice type II cleaved a Covenant dropship in half with its beam boomerang before ascending above the Orb Izumo class cruisers. We are shifting to a joint defense doctrine. Shin, Agnes, pull back from the Covenant vanguard. Form a defensive umbrella around the gray UNSC frigate. Their hull lacks beam-deflective coating. You are their shields. You want me to babysit the archaic ship? Shin yelled, the Destiny Spec II violently dodging a plasma lance. I can take that Covenant cruiser right now. Follow orders, Shin, Athran barked. They have the kinetic firepower to break the enemy's capital ships. We keep the fighters and plasma off them. Mu, coordinate with the Orb fleet. Keep Representative Atha safe. Understood, Mu Laflaga replied, the Akatsuki's Dragoon funnels forming a brilliant golden web of defensive fire around the Orb flagship. On the flagship's bridge, Kagaliula Atha watched the tactical map rewrite itself, the green blips of the UNSC merging seamlessly with the blue blips of the Earth sphere forces. It was a fragile, desperate alliance born in the fires of survival. Aboard the Covenant CCS class battlecruiser Harbinger of Piety, the Sanghili Fleetmaster stood with his hands clasped behind his back, his mandibles tight with grim respect. The vermin have linked their battle networks, a minor elite reported, tracking the sudden fluid shifts in the human formations. And the armored heretical constructs, a Covenant zealot sneered from the corner of the bridge, his golden armor gleaming. They are abominations of light. Swarms of insects to be burned away by the righteous fire of the great journey. They are not insects, they are warriors, the Fleetmaster growled, turning to face the zealot. They dance through our plasma. Their energy shields absorb what their agility cannot evade. If we fire wildly, we will only deplete our reserves. The Fleetmaster turned back to the holotank. Concentrate the fleet. I want overlapping fields of plasma fire. Saturate their designated defense zones. Deploy the elite Seraph squadrons to tie down the constructs and target their capital ships with continuous lateral lances. Overwhelm their strange phase armor with sheer thermal mass. The Covenant adaptation was instantaneous and brutal. A wall of violet and crimson death erupted from the alien armada. Dozens of plasma torpedoes, guided by adaptive magnetic tracking, converged on the newly formed human defensive grid. Here they come, Agnes Jebanrath shouted, her giant strom igniting its beam axes and hovering directly above the amber clad. Not on my watch, Shin roared. The Destiny Spec II engaged its Palma Fiasana palm beam cannons, unleashing devastating torrents of energy that detonated the plasma torpedoes hundreds of meters before they could strike the UNSC frigate. Inside the amber-clad, Marines pressed against the reinforced viewports, their jaws slack as they watched the towering, crimson-winged machines swat away capital-grade alien artillery like flies. "Lord," a Marine whispered, "I gotta get me one of those." "Save the gawking for shore leave, Marine," Sergeant Johnson barked, though even he couldn't hide the impressed gleam in his eye. "We got a war to win, Commander." Mac is green and hot. "Cortana, feed the targeting solution to the Gundams," Keyes ordered. "Tell them we're taking the shot on the lead Covenant carrier, but we need its shields lowered." "Targeting vector transmitted," Cortana said. In the mighty Strike Freedom, Kira Yamato's HUD flared with the UNSC data. He forced the lingering, suffocating dread of the ringworld to the back of his mind, letting the absolute clarity of the seed state take over. "Athrun, with me," Kira transmitted. The mighty Strike Freedom and the Infinite Justice Type II rocketed forward, slipping past the UNSC frigate like twin comets. A colossal Covenant CAS class assault carrier loomed ahead, its primary energy projector beginning to glow with blinding white heat. "Now," Kira shouted. Mighty Strike Freedom's multi-lock-on system achieved full saturation. Kira unleashed a terrifying, concentrated barrage from his beam rifles, abdomen cannon and railguns. A fraction of a second later, Athrun detached the Fodom 03 lifter, sending it crashing against the carrier's shields alongside a flurry of high-output beam fire. The Covenant shielding rippled, turning a violent, desperate gold under the sheer particle density of the Gundam assault. For 2 agonizing seconds, it held. Then, with a soundless shatter of dissipating energy, the shield collapsed. "Shields are down," Cortana yelled. "Fire," Keyes commanded. The amber-clad shuddered violently as the magnetic accelerator cannon discharged. A streak of hypersonic depleted uranium crossed the battlefield in a heartbeat. Without its energy shielding, the Covenant carrier's nanolaminate hull was useless against the sheer kinetic mass. The Mac round punched cleanly through the carrier's bow, traveling down the length of the ship and detonating the primary plasma reserves deep within its belly. The massive alien warship bulged outward before tearing itself apart in a spectacular, silent explosion of violet fire and shattered metal. A cheer erupted across the UNSC bridge. Even aboard the Millennium Asterisk, Arthur Trine pumped his fist in the air. Steel and titanium. Kinetic brute force perfectly synchronized with particle beam precision. For a fleeting moment, the human alliance held the high ground. Then, the true fury of the Covenant was unleashed. Infuriated by the loss of a holy carrier, the remaining Covenant armada abandoned all formation. Dozens of battle cruisers engaged their repulsor engines, closing the distance rapidly. They began a coordinated, fleet-wide superplasma maneuver, a glassing pattern directed not at the ring, but at the allied human fleets. "Captain, they're linking their plasma streams," Marin screamed. "It's a saturation wall, we can't evade." "Mac grid is collapsing, capacitors are dry," the UNSC tactical officer reported in a panic. "All mobile suits, extreme evasive maneuvers, pull back behind the battleships." Athrun commanded, his voice strained as the Infinite Justice struggled against the rising thermal radiation. But as the wall of Covenant plasma descended, the universe suddenly fractured. In the amber-clad, Cortana let out a piercing, agonized digital scream that echoed across every speaker on the ship. Master Chief collapsed to one knee in the corridor, his hand clutching his helmet as his neural lace spiked with blinding, static-filled pain. Above the ring, the mighty Strike Freedom's phase shift armor violently flickered. Kira gasped, his lungs constricting as if the oxygen had been ripped from the cockpit. The seed state dissolved, replaced by a cold, primordial terror. "Kira, what is it?" Lacus cried out over the comms. A massive, impossible energy signature violently ruptured the sensor screens of both the UNSC and Compass fleets. It was originating from the surface of Delta Halo, deep beneath the ice and the Forerunner metal. It was not a plasma signature. It was not a nuclear reactor. It was not a Forerunner activation pulse. It was dense, organic, and ancient. A necrotic frequency that completely bypassed the ship's sensors and resonated directly within the minds of every living human in orbit. Kira Yamato and Master Chief John 117 looked toward the ringworld at the exact same moment. Amidst the chaos of the Covenant's ultimate attack, both soldiers realized a singular, terrifying truth. The war in orbit no longer mattered. The true enemy of the universe had just broken its chains. Chapter 5: Uneasy Alliances. The orbital space above Installation 5 had cooled from a chaotic maelstrom into a tense, suffocating standoff. The Covenant Armada, bruised by the unexpected kinetic brutality of the Mac gun and the devastating precision of the Gundam units, had withdrawn to the far side of the gas giant substance. They were not retreating, they were regrouping. The void was now littered with the cooling slag of shattered Seraph fighters, gutted boarding torpedoes, and the frozen, crystalline debris of orb-laminated armor. Aboard the in amber clad, the main holotank flickered to life, projecting the bridge of the Compass Super Dreadnought Millennium *. Commander Miranda Keyes smoothed her uniform, her expression carefully neutral. Beside her, Sergeant Major Johnson stood with his hands behind his back, while Master Chief remained a silent, imposing sentinel in the background. On the projection, President Lacus Klein stood at the center, flanked by Kira Yamato, Athran Zala, and Mula Flaga. The visual contrast was stark. The UNSC officers in their utilitarian, worn olive drab, and the Cosmic-era pilots in their pristine, color-coded pilot suits and sleek command uniforms. "Commander Keyes," Lacus began, her voice carrying a calm, melodic authority that momentarily disarmed the tension on the UNSC bridge. "The immediate threat has subsided. However, our sensor telemetry indicates the alien fleet is consolidating for a secondary assault. If we are to survive, our cooperation must evolve from desperation to strategy." "Agreed, President Klein," Keyes replied firmly. "But to do that, we need to establish a unified chain of command. Under UNSC, Coal Protocol, and emergency wartime legislation, I am requesting that your forces integrate under my operational authority." The atmosphere on the Millennium bridge chilled instantly. Athran Zala stepped forward, his eyes narrowing. "With respect, Commander, we do not fall under your jurisdiction. We are a sovereign coalition of the Orb Union, ZAFT, and Compass. We will coordinate, but we will not submit to a foreign military hierarchy, especially one we know nothing about." Keyes bristled slightly. "Captain Zala, my ship possesses the only slipspace drive capable of getting us out of this system, and the only database containing the tactical knowledge required to fight the Covenant. If we operate as two separate fleets, they will divide and conquer us. And your ship is currently sitting in the shadow of my mobile suits, because your armor cannot withstand focused plasma fire," Athran countered smoothly, his tone ice cold. "We are your shield. Do not mistake our cooperation for subservience." Before the argument could escalate, Cortana's avatar materialized on the UNSC holotank, projecting simultaneously onto the screens of the Millennium. "Gentlemen, Commander," Cortana interjected, her voice carrying an edge of digital impatience. "We don't have time to measure ranks. I have been analyzing the battle data. The combat effectiveness of your mobile suits is unprecedented. Their thrust-to-weight ratios, beam weapon yields, and phase shift armor allow them to operate as high-mobility orbital strike assets. They excel in open-space dogfighting and precision strikes." Cortana brought up a tactical wireframe combining both fleets. Conversely, the in amber-clad lacks maneuverability but possesses catastrophic kinetic strike capability via the Mac gun. The optimal survival strategy is a hybrid command, a peer-to-peer network. We share targeting telemetry and sensor data in real time. Compass handles the Vanguard fighter screen and plasma interception. UNSC handles capital ship elimination and deep space tracking. Kira Yamato looked up from his console, his expression serious. "A peer-to-peer network. We keep our autonomy, but we fight as one unit. We will act as the Vanguard, Commander Keyes. We will keep their fighters and plasma off them. In exchange, we need your ship to break their carrier lines." Keyes looked at the young pilot. There was a quiet, unshakable resolve in his violet eyes. She glanced at the Master Chief, who gave a nearly imperceptible nod. "A joint operational command," Keyes agreed slowly. "We share data. We coordinate strikes, but if my ship goes down, you lose your only map of this galaxy. Protect it." "You have my word," Kira said softly. Aboard the Orb flagship, the mood was far less diplomatic. Chief Representative Kagali Yula Atha paced the length of the bridge, her amber eyes blazing. "A joint command, We don't even know who these people are. Their history doesn't match ours. What if this UNSC is an expansionist military dictatorship? We are Orb. We do not fight in foreign wars of aggression. Princess, this isn't a border dispute, Mullah Flaga said, leaning against a console. Did you see the size of that alien fleet? They didn't ask for our passports, they tried to vaporize us. The gray ship is the only thing out here that shoots back at the monsters instead of us. We play nice or we die. Across the fleet, within the hangars of the ZAFT Nazca class destroyers, the pilots were equally restless. Shin Asuka slammed his fist into the bulkhead of the Destiny Spec II's gantry. We should be taking the fight to them. If we wait here, they're just going to surround us again. My destiny can break their lines. Don't be an idiot, Shin, Agnes Jebanrath drawled, examining her manicured nails as she floated in the zero-G of the pilot locker room. That alien fleet is massive. And did you see their shielding? It took the combined fire of the Freedom and Justice just to crack one ship. We stay in formation. Let the archaic humans soak up the damage while we flank. We fight to survive, not to show off, Luna Maria Hawk interjected, floating between them. Athrun is right, we don't know this enemy's tactics, we hold the line. Back on the Asterisk in amber clad, the bridge crew was frantically recalibrating the ship's systems to accommodate the massive influx of data from the Gundam fleet. Their sensor range is incredible, the tactical officer marveled, watching the compass telemetry overlay onto their own. They use some kind of quantum communication network. It bypasses the Covenant plasma jamming entirely. Yes, but their operating system is a nightmare, Cortana muttered, her avatar flickering as she processed terabytes of unfamiliar code. It's heavily reliant on genetic engineering interfaces. Their pilots are processing targeting data at a neurological speed that should cause aneurysms in baseline humans. Master Chief approached the holotank, observing the blue wireframes of the mobile suits. Cortana, can you interface with their suits? Only passively, Chief, Cortana replied. Their firewalls are surprisingly robust, but I have established a direct, unencrypted channel with the pilot of the white and gold unit, the one they call Kira Yamato. Put him through. A window opened on the Master Chief's HUD, displaying Kira in his cockpit. The young pilot looked exhausted, the sweat matting his brown hair, but his eyes were sharp. Master Chief, Kira said, the audio crisp in the Spartan's helmet. Cortana informed me you are their primary boarding defense. I am, Chief replied, his voice a low, gravelly rumble. Your machines are fast, but if the Covenant breach your hulls, your suits won't save your crews. We have internal security, Kira countered gently. Against elites and hunters, standard security is target practice, Chief stated flatly. If your ships are boarded, you vent the atmosphere in the affected decks and pull back. Do not engage them in close quarters. Kira paused, reading the absolute, emotionless certainty in the Spartan's voice. Understood, we will adapt our internal defense protocols. The conversation was clinical, stripped of all political posturing. It was the language of soldiers. Suddenly, the in amber-clad Asterisk-S deck vibrated with a low, subaudible hum. On the Millennium, the gravity plating momentarily fluctuated. Report, Keyes barked. No Covenant activity detected, the sensor operator replied, his hands flying across his console. But Commander, I'm getting a massive anomalous reading. From where? The Covenant fleet. No ma'am, it's coming from the ring. Cortana's avatar turned a sickly, pale yellow. Commander, I am detecting a signal deep within Delta Halo's crust. It is not Covenant, it is not Forerunner, and it is not human. At the exact same moment, on the Millennium Asterisk, Albert Heinlein shot up from his chair. Captain, spatial distortion detected. It's identical to the one that brought us here, but the frequency is inverted. It's originating from the planetoid's surface. A deafening, low-frequency pulse swept across the entire orbital space. It carried no heat, no kinetic force, but every single human in the fleet felt it. It was a sensation of profound, ancient decay. The Covenant fleet is moving, Cortana warned, her voice tight. But they aren't moving toward us. They're descending into the ring's atmosphere. They are heading straight for the source of the anomaly. Keyes exchanged a look with the Master Chief. They're going after the ring's activation index. On the Millennium Asterisk, Kira gripped his controls, his heart pounding against his ribs. The seed within him was screaming, a terrifying psychic warning that had nothing to do with the Covenant. Captain, Kira transmitted, his voice trembling slightly. Whatever is down there, the Covenant are terrified of it. The void between the fleets fell dead silent. Then, the massive, unidentified spatial distortion near the surface of Delta Halo began to violently expand, tearing the artificial sky of the ringworld open. The uneasy alliance had been forged just in time to witness the true nightmare awaken. Chapter 6: The Oracle's Truth. The void above Installation 5 had ceased to be a mere battlefield. It had become a conduit. The spatial distortion that had erupted from the ringworld's surface did not detonate. Instead, it expanded into a massive, oscillating sphere of rippling gravitational waves, bending the starlight behind it. To the naked eye, it was a blur in the cosmos. To the sensor arrays of two disparate human fleets, it was an avalanche of impossible data. Aboard the UNSC in amber-clad, Cortana's holographic form flickered violently, her usual calm blue shifting into a rapid, anxious spectrum of violet and white. "It's not random," Cortana stated, her voice echoing with a synthetic edge as she dedicated nearly all her processing power to the incoming telemetry. "It's not background radiation, and it's not slipspace wake. It is a structured transmission, but it's not using radio frequencies or quantum entanglement. It is communicating by directly manipulating the local gravitational constants." "Can you translate it?" Commander Miranda Keyes asked, gripping the edge of the holodable as the deck plating vibrated beneath her boots. "I am trying, Commander, but the mathematical foundation is terrifyingly complex. It is actively adapting to my decryption algorithms. It learns every time I ping it." Cortana paused, her avatar freezing for a microsecond, an eternity for an AI. "It's not Covenant, and it's not human. It matches Forerunner architectural harmonics, but the intent. The intent feels reactive. It is assessing us." Across the dimensional divide, the bridge of the compass Super Dreadnought * Millennium was bathed in the red glow of system alerts. "Captain, we are experiencing massive data overlap," Marin Hawk reported, her hands flying across her console as warning screens multiplied. "The anomaly is broadcasting a frequency that is resonating with the Minovsky-like particles from our reactors. It's bypassing our external communications and writing itself directly into the tactical network." "Cut the network feed, isolate the mainframes," Muru Ramius ordered. "I can't, the firewalls are intact, but the data is just appearing inside the drives." Albert Heinlein stammered, frantically adjusting his glasses. "The mathematical structure of this signal is rewriting its own code to bypass our encryption. It's a living algorithm." Out in the cold vacuum, the mobile suit teams hovered in a tight defensive sphere, their weapons drawn but useless against the unseen force washing over them. Inside the mighty Strike Freedom, Kira Yamato's breath hitched. The panoramic monitors of his cockpit were beginning to distort, rendering faint, ghostly geometric patterns over the stars. The ultra-compact nuclear reactor hummed with a strange, harmonic resonance, as if singing back to the anomaly. But it was not the technology that disturbed Kira. It was the crushing, psychic weight pressing against his mind. The seed factor, his heightened spatial awareness, was reacting violently. "Athrun," Kira gasped over the secure laser link, clutching his chest. "Do you feel that?" "My reactor output is fluctuating by 3%, but it's stable," Athrun Zala replied, the Infinite Justice's sensors sweeping the void methodically. "Kira, this is a strategic nightmare. It's probing our targeting systems and our propulsion capabilities. If this is a Forerunner defense mechanism, it's evaluating our threat level. We need to maintain absolute firing discipline. Do not lock onto the ring." "No, it's not a weapon," Kira whispered, his violet eyes wide and unfocused. It's in pain. It's suffering, Athrun. It's trying to warn us." "Warn us about what?" Shin Asuka demanded, his voice tight with adrenaline and mounting frustration. The Destiny Spec II shifted restlessly. "Whatever is down there, it just scrambled our entire fleet's radar. If it's dangerous, we should blast the source before the Covenant can get their hands on it." "Stand down, Shin," Athrun barked. "We don't even know what we'd be shooting at." "Athrun is correct." Agnes Jebanrath's voice sliced through the comms, cold and pragmatically sharp. Her giant Strom maintained a flawless holding pattern. This intelligence is manipulating physics on a scale we cannot comprehend. It is superior strategic technology. Destroying it would be a monumental waste. We must secure it before the archaic humans or the aliens do. The philosophical fracture was spreading rapidly up the chain of command. Aboard the Orb flagship, Chief Representative Kagali Eula Atha slammed her fist onto her command console. "We are not securing anything," Kagali declared, broadcasting to the Joint Command Network. "We are entirely out of our depth. This is not our universe, and this is not our war. We must not be drawn into an alien holy crusade over unknown technology. Mew, keep the fleet ready to break orbit." "Easier said than done, Princess," Mew Laflaga replied, the Akatsuki hovering protectively nearby. "That gravitational pulse is playing havoc with our thrusters, and if we turn our backs now, the Covenant will tear us apart while we're limping." On the Millennium Asterisk, Lacus Klein watched the fluctuating data streams with profound sorrow. "It is not merely an intelligence," she murmured softly, her words carrying across the open frequency bridging the human fleets. "Feels like the voice of this world, but it is not a voice of creation. It is the voice of a cage." Aboard the in amber clad, Miranda Keyes listened to the compass transmissions with mounting unease. The political and philosophical debate of the cosmic era forces was a luxury the UNSC could not afford. "Commander," Cortana interrupted, her voice snapping Keyes back to the tactical reality. "I have managed to synthesize a partial translation of the signal fragments. It's heavily corrupted, but the linguistic roots share similarities with the data we pulled from Installation 4. "Put it on screen," Keyes ordered. The holotank shifted from the orbital map to a cascade of scrolling alien glyphs that slowly forced themselves into English syntax. "Unregistered biomass, containment protocol, the parasite, quarantine failure, penitent tangent." Sergeant Johnson leaned in, chewing his cigar to a pulp. "Parasite, quarantine, Commander, this ain't a command center down there. It's a damn laboratory, or a prison." "And the inmates are breaking out," Master Chief rumbled. The Spartan stood perfectly still, his battle rifle magnetically slung across his back. He had seen the horrors of Installation 4. He knew exactly what the word parasite meant in the context of a Halo ring. If the Flood was on Delta Halo, the Covenant Armada was no longer the primary threat to humanity. "Chief," Keyes said, her voice dropping to a serious, hardened register. "Prep the HEV pods. If that intelligence is the ring's monitor, we need to know what it knows. We may need to enact a ground insertion." "Understood," Chief replied. "Commander Keyes," Athron's voice suddenly transmitted over the UNSC bridge speakers. "Our long-range optics show massive thermal blooms from the far side of the gas giant. The Covenant fleet is breaking its holding pattern." Cortana's display instantly updated. The massive, bulbous purple icons of the Covenant Armada surged across the tactical grid. "They are accelerating. Full combat spread. But they are ignoring us, Commander. They are entering atmospheric entry vectors directly toward the anomaly's epicenter." In the sanctum of the solemn penance asterisk, the prophet of regret was practically convulsing with religious ecstasy. "The oracle speaks," Regret shrieked, pointing a trembling, withered finger at the holographic representation of the spatial distortion. "The divine light of the Forerunners beckons us. The sacred ring awakens." "Excellency," the Sangheli Fleetmaster cautioned, his mandibles tight with disciplined apprehension. "The signal is erratic. It speaks of containment and parasites. It may be a warning of the demon's corruption." "Blasphemy," Regret roared, hovering closer to the elite. "It is a test of our faith. The great journey requires sacrifice. Order the fleet into the atmosphere. Deploy the Phantoms, the Scarabs, and the Zealots. We will secure the Oracle, and we will activate the Holy Ring, sweeping the heretics from the stars." The Fleetmaster bowed, hiding his deep misgivings. "By your will, Hierarch, the fleet descends." The orbital space above Delta Halo was no longer a standoff. It was a race toward the abyss. "They're going for it," Mew Laflaga reported, watching the Covenant Armada dive into the artificial atmosphere of the ringworld. "If whatever is down there is a weapon, and they get their hands on it, we're finished." "Commander Keyes," Kira's voice was tense, laced with a desperation that cut through the military formalities. "We cannot let them reach it, but we cannot destroy it either. We don't know what systems are tied to that signal. If we fire into the anomaly, we might trigger a catastrophic reaction." "We investigate," Keyes decided, the weight of command settling heavily on her shoulders. Cortana, plot an atmospheric descent vector for the in amber clad. Keep us behind the Covenant wake. Compass forces, maintain orbital superiority and cover our descent. Negative, Commander, Athrun replied instantly. We are not leaving you blind. Shin, Lunamaria, form up on the in amber clad. Kira and I will take the vanguard. Let's see what this oracle really is, Shin muttered, his destiny spec II locking its weapons hot. But before the ships could fire their main thrusters, the spatial distortion between the fleets reached critical mass. The void did not explode. It unfolded. In the space directly between the UNSC frigate and the mighty Strike Freedom, a colossal, three-dimensional projection materialized. It was comprised entirely of hard light, glowing, impossible forerunner geometry that folded and intersected in ways that made the human eye water. It was not a physical ship, nor a machine, but a localized manifestation of the ring's intelligence. A silence so profound it felt physical swept across all comms channels. The hum of the mobile suit reactors, the vibration of the Mac gun capacitors, everything seemed to mute. Then the data surge hit. It bypassed screens. It bypassed speakers. It downloaded directly into the sensory processing centers of every human and AI present. On the UNSC bridge, Cortana froze. Her avatar locked into a rigid, terrifying pose, her code halting as it attempted to process a mathematical infinity. In the cockpit of the Strike Freedom, Kira Yamato cried out, clutching his head as a voice, ancient, metallic, and laced with mechanical panic, spoke directly into his consciousness. Master Chief's HUD violently pixelated. The tactical display vanished, replaced by an impossible golden forerunner glyph that burned into the Spartans' retinas. The voice echoed across the silent void, perfectly translated, perfectly terrifying. I am 2401 Penitent Tangent. Protocol dictates immediate sterilization. The parasite has breached the quarantine zone. The Ark is out of reach. To all sentient constructs, prepare for firing sequence. The projection vanished. The space returned to normal. But the reality of their situation had fundamentally altered. The Covenant were racing toward a holy relic. The Gundam pilots were trying to survive an alien war. The UNSC was trying to save Earth. But Delta Halo was preparing to kill them all. Chapter 7: Descent into the Library. The Oracle's broadcast had severed the fragile equilibrium of the orbital war. The terrifying mandate of a firing sequence, coupled with the Covenant Armada's sudden plunge into Delta Halo's atmosphere, left the Allied human fleets with only one suicidal option. They had to follow them down. The descent was not a tactical insertion. It was a plunge into the abyss. Beneath the artificial clouds and the sprawling, verdant terrariums of the Ringworld's surface lay a gaping chasm of forerunner metal. It was a structural fracture that descended directly into the megastructure's mantle, a throat swallowing the descending fleets. Inside the troop bay of a UNSC Pelican, Master Chief John 117 stood anchored to the deck, the emerald plating of his MJOLNIR armor illuminated by the blinking red jump lights. Beside him, Sergeant Major Johnson checked the action of his battle rifle, the usual bravado wiped from his face. We're passing through the outer crust, the Pelican pilot reported, his voice tight over the comms. Losing telemetry with the in amber clad. The rock and whatever this metal is, it's baffling our radar. We are flying blind, Chief. Hold your descent vector, Commander Key's voice crackled, barely audible through the mounting static. The Covenant cruisers are too large to fit through the primary shafts. They've deployed phantoms and infantry. You are to secure the index or the intelligence source before they do. Keys out, ZZT. The comms died, replaced by a hollow, white hiss. The interference is not merely physical, Chief, Cortana's voice echoed in his helmet. Unlike her usual crisp delivery, her tone carried an edge of digital vibration, a subtle stutter. The architecture here it's broadcasting a localized data field. It's recursive. I am trying to map our trajectory, but the spatial geometry is nonlinear. The dimensions of this shaft are mathematically contradicting their own volume. Can you track the Covenant? Chief asked, his voice a low, steady anchor against her growing instability. Faintly, Cortana replied, her avatar flickering erratically on his HUD. But I am detecting something else. Background processing loops, containment protocols. Chief, the data density down here is suffocating. It feels like an archive, but it's structured like a vault. The Pelican's ramp lowered with a hydraulic whine, revealing a sight that defied human comprehension. They had entered a subterranean cavern so immense it had its own internal atmosphere. Fog clung to the bottomless depths below, while towering pillars of gray, geometric metal stretched upwards into infinity. It was a cathedral built for gods, entirely devoid of warmth. Descending alongside the UNSC dropships were the mobile suits. Even at 18 meters tall, the mighty Strike Freedom and the Infinite Justice looked like insignificant insects drifting through the belly of a leviathan. Inside his cockpit, Shin Asuka's breathing was shallow and rapid. The Destiny Spec II hovered cautiously, its optical sensors struggling to pierce the gloom. "This is wrong," Shin muttered, his hands gripping the controls tight enough to whiten his knuckles. "It's too tight. If we get ambushed in here, there's no room to accelerate." "Maintain tight formation," Athran Zala ordered, his voice clinically sharp. The Infinite Justice descended with its beam rifle lowered. "All units, listen carefully. We are in a confined, pressurized environment of unknown structural integrity. I am enacting absolute beam weapon restrictions. No high-yield antimatter blasts. No plasma cannons. If you miss and strike a primary load-bearing strut, you could collapse millions of tons of artificial crust on top of us. Engage with physical blades, CIWS, or low-power beam sabers only." "We're walking into a cage match with our hands tied," Agnes Jebenrath complained, though the usual arrogance had drained from her voice. The giant Strom sensors were throwing up hundreds of ghost contacts, echoes bouncing off the Forerunner alloys. Kira Yamato remained silent. The mighty Strike Freedom drifted down, its golden joints glowing faintly in the dark. Kira's eyes were dilated, his mind straining against an oppressive, invisible weight. "It's not just an archive asterisk," Kira thought, his chest tightening. The seed factor, usually a source of absolute clarity, was feeding him raw, unadulterated dread. The metal around them was sterile, yet it felt stained. He could feel an echo, a psychic resonance of terror and desperate, ancient violence that had soaked into the very walls. "Mew," Kira transmitted on a tight, low-frequency laser link. "The geometry, what do you see?" Above them, the golden Akatsuki rotated its cameras. "It's a nightmare, Kira. The angles are perfect, but they don't make sense. Corridors that look 10 meters wide from the outside are a kilometer wide on the inside. It's like the architects folded space to fit more inside the ring. It's not a fortress. It's a labyrinth." Suddenly, the Millennium Asterisk-S quantum link flickered one last time. Lacus Klein's voice, fragile and distant, bled through the static. "Kira, the surface structures, they are shifting. Please come back safely, I." The link snapped. They were entirely cut off from the sky. Deeper still, the Covenant Vanguard touched down on a massive, perfectly flat metallic platform that bridged the abyss. Phantoms deposited squads of Sangheli zealots, their golden armor gleaming in the harsh violet light of their plasma rifles. Behind them marched files of heavily armed elites and grunts. "Spread out, secure the perimeter," a Sangheli commander barked, his energy sword igniting with a lethal hiss. "The Oracle's sanctum must be near. We must find the Ascension Gate, before the vermin soil it with their presence." A zealot, his helmet adorned with the intricate markings of the Prophet's Guard, stepped forward, his posture rigid with religious ecstasy. "Look upon this holy architecture, Commander, the sheer magnitude of the Forerunner's design. This is the path to the great journey. The Oracle has called us to light the ring." The commander narrowed his eyes, examining a massive 50-meter-tall blast door set into the cavern wall. "Perhaps, but look at the bulkheads, Zealot." The Zealot scoffed. "What of them?" "They are scorched," the commander said softly, his military instincts screaming at him. He pointed a massive, four-fingered hand at deep, jagged gouges in the metal, accompanied by black, carbonized stains. "That is not plasma scarring, and it is not the kinetic damage of the human vermin. Something fought here long ago. Something that the Forerunners tried very hard to burn." "Do not let your courage falter in the shadow of the divine," the Zealot warned, turning away. "We push forward, for the hierarchs." The UNSC and Gundam forces rendezvoused on a secondary platform, a few kilometers above the Covenant insertion point. The massive boots of the mobile suits touched down silently, their thrusters cutting out. Master Chief led the Marine squads out of the Pelicans, their helmet lamps cutting through the fog. The mobile suits stood in a defensive ring around the humans, towering guardians of titanium and phase shift armor. "Cortana," Chief said, moving toward a massive, dark archway leading deeper into the structure. "Status." I'm processing, Cortana replied. Her voice was lagging, the syllables slightly distorted. Chief, I am detecting massive subroutines running beneath the floor plating. Automated systems are waking up, but they aren't life support. They are sterilization protocols. And oh no. What is it? Commander Keyes asked over the local marine net. I am picking up biological signatures, Cortana whispered. Deep within the structure, it's not the Covenant, it's a carpet of biomass. Millions of individual cells, but they're reading as a single distributed organism. And they are moving. Kira's comms crackled as the mighty Strike Freedom knelt down, bringing its cockpit closer to the Marines. Master Chief, our thermal sensors are failing, but my bioradar is detecting irregular movement behind the walls. It feels hungry. Hold the line, Chief ordered the Marines. Nobody fires unless I do. Bind Expeditionary Force moved into the archway, entering the library pathways. The corridors were immense, easily accommodating the Gundams, but the psychological pressure was suffocating. The silence was absolute, broken only by the heavy, rhythmic thud of the mobile suit's footsteps and the crunch of Marine boots. As they ventured deeper, the pristine Forerunner architecture gave way to decay. Emergency containment shields, translucent barriers of hard light, flickered erratically across side passages. Strange, dried organic matter, like decayed webbing, clung to the corners of the ceiling. My radar is a mess, Shin reported, his voice shaking. I'm getting ghost contacts everywhere. Above us, below us, inside the walls. It's like the whole structure is crawling. Athron's sensors chimed. Contact, straight ahead, massive cavern. The corridor opened abruptly into an expanse so vast the mobile suit's floodlights couldn't find the opposite wall. At the center of this abyss was a structure that defied reason, a colossal, multi-tiered chamber sealed by a circular door that looked thick enough to withstand a supernova. It radiated a low, sickening hum. Across the abyss, on a corresponding walkway, violet lights flared. The Covenant had arrived at the exact same location. Chief, Cortana's voice suddenly fractured, her avatar flashing a violently sickly green on his HUD. The chamber, I've decrypted the architectural registry. It's a stasis vault, a primary quarantine lock. The biosignatures, they aren't just behind the walls anymore. They are gathered right behind that door. In the cockpit of his Gundam, Kira Yamato froze. The overwhelming dread suddenly sharpened into a distinct psychic resonance. It wasn't a voice. It was a million voices, overlapping in a wet, tearing whisper that echoed in his very soul. Consume. Down on the platform, Master Chief's motion tracker, which had been completely clear a second before, suddenly blossomed with hundreds of rapidly moving red dots. But they weren't coming from the Covenant across the chasm. They were coming from the impossible geometry of the ceiling directly above them. Across the void, the Covenant Zealot raised his energy sword toward the colossal, humming door. The Ascension Gate, the great journey is at hand. As the Zealot stepped forward, the deep, mechanical groan of failing Forerunner locks echoed through the abyss. The descent was over. The nightmare had found them. Chapter 8, The Parasite Awakens. The colossal Forerunner blast door across the chasm did not open with the majestic, silent grace of divine architecture. It ground upward with a rusted mechanical shriek, accompanied by the hiss of failing pressurization seals. The Covenant Zealot stood before the widening aperture, his energy sword held high, his golden armor catching the faint, flickering violet lights of the cavern. He awaited the holy light of the Ascension Gate. He awaited the Forerunners. What poured out from the darkness was a tidal wave of sickly, rotting flesh. They looked like bloated, pale bladders of organic matter, trailing, writhing, whip-like tentacles. Thousands of them, infection forms, spilled over the lip of the doorway, a skittering, squealing carpet of biomass that cascaded over the Zealot's boots. What heresy is this? The Zealot roared, swinging his energy sword downward. The superheated plasma vaporized half a dozen of the creatures with a sickening pop, but the sheer volume of the swarm was unstoppable. 3 infection forms leapt simultaneously, latching onto the Zealot's energy shielding. The shields flared, draining rapidly under the sheer physical assault, before collapsing with a sharp crack. An infection form drove its razor-sharp calcium penetrator directly through the Zealot's chest plating, burrowing into his spinal cord. The Sanghili commander watched in absolute, paralyzed horror. The Zealot did not die. His spine violently snapped backward with a horrific crunch. His neck forced at a physically impossible angle, the jaw distending as the chest cavity burst open to reveal the pulsating, parasitic mass within. Within 3 seconds, the zealot rose from the deck, his energy sword igniting once more, but he no longer turned it toward the darkness. He lunged at his own commander. "Demons!" the commander bellowed, raising his plasma rifle. "Burn them, burn the defilers." But as the Covenant plasma rained into the swarm, the superheated bolts merely caused the bulbous forms to violently burst, scattering a thick, choking cloud of necrotic spores across the elite and grunt formations. Panic, absolute and doctrine-shattering, consumed the holy expedition. Across the abyss, the Master Chief did not wait for the door to open. His motion tracker was entirely red. Above us, Chief roared. From the impossible geometric shadows of the cavern ceiling, it rained flesh. Infection forms plummeted down upon the UNSC and Gundam defensive perimeter. "Open fire, short, controlled bursts," Sergeant Major Johnson bellowed, his assault rifle chattering as he tracked a cluster of the creatures skittering across a Forerunner terminal. The heavy 7.62 armor-piercing rounds tore the organic balloons to shreds, splattering the gray metal with foul, yellowish-green fluid. The Marines formed a tight circle around the dropships, their weapons flashing continuously in the gloom. But the enemy was completely devoid of self-preservation. A Marine screamed as an infection form dropped onto his shoulder, its tentacles whipping around his neck. Chief closed the distance in a blur of green titanium, ripping the creature off the man's armor and crushing it in his gauntlet with a wet, heavy squelch. "Chief!" Cortana's voice cried out, cutting through the deafening roar of gunfire. Her holographic avatar was flickering erratically, plagued by static. "I have decrypted the lock registries. They are not Forerunner machines. They are biomechanical cells of a single, highly adaptive, self-replicating organism." "How do we stop it?" Chief asked, firing a burst into a lunging flood combat form, a horrifically mutated Sanghili that had leapt the entire width of the chasm. "Yuka!" Cortana's voice was laced with a synthetic terror he had never heard before. "Chief, the data from the orbital network Delta Halo isn't just a superweapon. It's a quarantine zone. It's a cage built to starve this parasite. And we just broke the seal." For the Gundam pilots of the cosmic era, warfare was an art of ballistics, beam dynamics, and political ideology. It was clean, it was mechanical. The enemy surging over their mobile suits was none of these things. "Get off me, get off!" Shin Asuka screamed, his pupils dilated in pure, visceral panic. The Destiny Spec II violently shook its massive chassis as hundreds of infection forms crawled over its phase shift armor, seeking entry points in the joints and ventilation grills. Shin raised the Destiny's high-energy beam rifle, aiming at a massive, bloated carrier form waddling across the walkway, and pulled the trigger. The antimatter beam struck the flood form, but unlike titanium or laminated armor, the immense biological mass flash-boiled instantly. The resulting explosion of superheated steam and vaporized necrotic tissue was devastating. The concussive biological blast knocked a squad of UNSC Marines off their feet, and the beam continued onward, striking a primary Forerunner load-bearing strut. The cavern violently shuddered, and a massive chunk of the ceiling collapsed, crushing a Pelican dropship beneath thousands of tons of alloy. "Cease beam fire," Athran Zala ordered, his voice cracking like a whip over the chaotic comms. The Infinite Justice Type II ignited its beam sabers, its crimson form becoming a blurring whirlwind of close-quarters precision. He severed the limbs of mutated Covenant forms leaping at the mobile suits, carefully controlling his output. "Shin, Agnes. Do not use high-yield weapons. You are flash vaporizing their biomass and destabilizing the structure." "Then what are we supposed to do?" Agnes Jebenrath shrieked, her giant Strom stomping wildly, crushing dozens of infection forms beneath its feet in a desperate, uncoordinated dance. "They're everywhere. My cameras are covered in blood." Inside the cockpit of the mighty Strike Freedom, Kira Yamato was completely immobilized. His hands gripped the yokes, but he could not move. The seed factor, the genetic awakening that granted him unparalleled combat awareness, was tearing his mind apart. This was not the hostile lock-on of a ZAFT pilot, nor the cold calculation of an automated drone. It was a psychic scream. Kira gasped, clutching his chest as the sheer weight of the flood's collective consciousness washed over his heightened senses. He felt a ravenous, ancient, and absolute hunger. It was a pain so profound, an agony of endless consumption that it brought tears to his violet eyes. "Kira!" Athron yelled as a massive group of flood-infected elites bounded toward the stationary Freedom, firing stolen Covenant rocket launchers. They're eating everything, Kira whispered, his voice trembling. He forced his hands to move, the Freedom drawing its railguns, kinetic weapons, and unleashing a devastating volley of solid rounds that shredded the incoming combat forms. Above them, Mullah Flaga's Akatsuki provided covering fire with its CIWS Vulcan guns, tearing lines through the swarms. "This isn't an alien army, kids," Mew broadcasted over the emergency channel. "It's a contagion, a biological weapon. Don't let them breach your cockpits, or you're going to end up just like those Covenant soldiers." In the orbit above Delta Halo, the tactical grids aboard the Millennium and the in amber clad were collapsing into a sea of red errors. "We've lost telemetry with the ground teams," Marin Hawk reported, her voice pitched with panic. "The biosignatures inside the structure are multiplying at an exponential rate. It's overriding our sensors." Muru Ramius gripped the command console, looking toward the UNSC frigate on the visual feed. "Commander Keyes, what is happening down there? Our pilots are reporting biological entities." On the UNSC bridge, Keyes stared at the tactical table, her face ashen. "It's the flood. It's a parasitic life form that consumes sentient biomass. The Covenant just triggered a containment failure." Lacus Klein stepped forward on the Millennium *S bridge, her hands clasped tightly. She engaged the primary quantum broadcast system, attempting to push a signal through the Forerunner interference. "Kira, Athron, can you hear me? You must retreat. Pull back to the extraction zones." The transmission violently cut out, replaced by a deep, wet, static-laced frequency that made everyone on both bridges cover their ears. It was not a mechanical jammer. The interference was organic. Deep within the library, the survival horror had reached a tipping point. The UNSC Marines were running out of ammunition. Sergeant Johnson drove his combat knife through the chest of an infected grunt, kicking the corpse off his blade. "Chief, we gotta fall back. The LZ is getting overrun." Master Chief fired the last round in his battle rifle, slinging the weapon and drawing his M6C Magnum. He moved to the front of the Marine formation, a bulwark of green armor holding back the tide. "Fall back to the primary elevator shafts. Move." But as the Allied forces began a desperate fighting retreat, the nature of the battlefield fundamentally shifted. The skittering, mindless swarm of infection forms suddenly ceased their frantic wave tactics. The infected Covenant elites stopped rushing blindly into the mobile suit's CIWS fire. The cavern fell eerily silent, save for the wet, shuffling sound of millions of organic bodies shifting in unison. "Why did they stop?" Luna Maria asked, the force impulse tracking the sudden stillness. In Master Chief's helmet, Cortana's avatar solidified into a stark, rigid pose. "Chief, the biomass. It's no longer acting on feral instinct. The local neural network has reached critical mass." Kira's eyes widened in the dark cockpit of the Strike Freedom. The chaotic scream in his mind had suddenly unified into a single, terrifying chord of cold, calculating intellect. From the shadows of the upper balconies, flood combat forms began to take cover behind Forerunner pillars. They raised stolen UNSC battle rifles and Covenant beam rifles, aiming them not with the frantic jerk of a zombie, but with the precise, tactical discipline of seasoned soldiers. They began to establish intersecting fields of fire. "They are synchronizing," Cortana whispered, a deep dread in her digital voice. "A central intelligence node has formed." The Master Chief and Kira Yamato, separated by scale and universe, but united by the instinct of soldiers, realized the horrific truth at the exact same moment. The parasite was no longer just feeding. It was commanding, and it knew exactly how to trap them. Chapter 9: Fire on the Ark. The library had become an abattoir, an endless geometric slaughterhouse where the lines between holy war and biological extermination had completely dissolved. The Covenant vanguard, initially sent to secure the Ascension Gate, was shattering from within. As the flood combat forms, wielding stolen plasma rifles and energy swords with terrifying, coordinated precision, pressed the assault, the Sanghili command structure fractured. "Fall back to the primary gravity lift." A Sanghili field master roared over the chaotic battlenet, his plasma repeater overheating in his hands as he laid down suppressing fire. "Seal the bulkheads. They are not a trial, they are an infection." Cowardice, a zealot shrieked, his golden armor splattered with the sickly green fluids of burst infection forms. The zealot did not retreat. Instead, he ignited twin energy swords, his eyes wide with a manic, religious fervor. This is the crucible of the Forerunners, the cleansing fire before the great journey. To run is heresy, embrace the trial. The field master watched in absolute horror as the zealot, followed by dozens of fanatical grunts and minor elites, charged directly into a surging mass of flood biomass. They were not fighting to survive, they were fighting to be deemed worthy. The parasite accommodated them instantly. Within seconds, the zealots were overwhelmed, their spines snapped, their bodies twisted and repurposed before the field master's eyes. The holy warriors of the Covenant had willingly given the flood its most lethal shock troops. The prophets have doomed us, the field master whispered, before turning to his surviving veterans. Break the line, evacuate to the phantoms. High above the subterranean nightmare, the orbital space remained a tense standoff, but the true war was being fought via telemetry. Aboard the UNSC in amber-clad Asterisk, Commander Miranda Keyes stared at the holographic cross-section of Delta Halo's crust. The red biological markers representing the flood were no longer spreading like a liquid spill. They were moving in distinct, arterial columns, deliberately cutting off escape routes. They're flanking our ground forces, Keyes said, her voice tight with disbelief. It's a strategic encirclement. Commander, we have lost contact with 3 Marine squads, the tactical officer reported, his voice shaking. The mobile suits are holding the main junctions, but they are being overwhelmed by sheer volume. If the infection breaches the upper atmospheric vents, it will spread to the surface. We will lose the ring. Keyes gripped the holodable. The Cole Protocol dictated that no Covenant or alien threat could be allowed to reach Earth, but if the flood claimed the Allied fleets, Earth wouldn't matter, the galaxy would be consumed. Initiate emergency containment, Keyes ordered, her eyes hardening. Protocol, fire on the Ark. Spool the MAC capacitors. We are going to bombard the internal structure. Cortana's avatar flared a brilliant, warning amber. Commander, firing a magnetic accelerator cannon into the superstructure of a Forerunner installation is mathematically suicidal. The kinetic shockwave inside a pressurized environment could collapse the entire sector, burying the Master Chief and the Gundam units. Furthermore, my scans indicate the ring's automated systems are already highly unstable. If we damage a primary subterranean conduit, Delta Halo might activate its own defensive measures against us. If we don't collapse those corridors, the parasite will consume everyone down there, Keyes countered. Calculate a firing solution. Target the primary structural intersections directly ahead of the flood's main migration columns. We need to create a physical blockade of collapsed Forerunner alloy. Give the ground teams a chance to breathe. Calculating, Cortana replied grimly, transmitting warning to all Allied frequencies. Deep within the cavernous halls of the library, Master Chief John 117 received the telemetry. Johnson, Chief barked, slamming a fresh magazine into his battle rifle. He fired a precise 3-round burst into the distended mass of a carrier form, detonating it before it could reach the Marine line. The in amber clad is bringing the MAC online. They're bringing the roof down on the northern quadrant. Sergeant Major Johnson wiped a mixture of sweat and alien blood from his visor. About damn time. Marines, tactical withdrawal. Keep your fields of fire overlapping. We are leaving this roach motel. The humans fell back, their boots slipping on the spore-choked metal decking. But the flood forms did not blindly pursue. They moved between the shadows of the massive Forerunner pillars, laying down suppressing fire with stolen Covenant carbines, pinning the Marines down. They were fighting like a trained army. For the Gundam pilots, the biological nightmare had stripped away all pretenses of standard warfare. Burn, just burn, Shin Asuka screamed, his voice raw. The Destiny Spec II stood at the center of a massive intersection, its Palma Fiasna palm cannons unleashing torrents of destructive energy into the corridors. The superheated beams flash-vaporized hundreds of flood forms, filling the confined space with a thick, suffocating fog of steam and necrotic ash. Shin's breathing was hyperventilating, his eyes wide and frantic. The sheer visceral horror of the biological enemy had triggered a deep, primal aggression within him. He drew the Destiny's beam boomerang, hurling it down a hallway. The weapon carved a gruesome path through the flesh, but for every creature it destroyed, 3 more crawled over the walls and ceiling to take its place. Shin, watch your fire, Athran Zala commanded. The infinite justice type II moved with clinical, ruthless efficiency. Athran had detached the Fatum 03 lifter, using it as an autonomous drone to sweep the ceilings, severing the infection forms before they could drop onto the mobile suits. If you destabilize the thermal regulators in these walls, you'll melt us all. Short, controlled bursts. Exterminate, do not obliterate. They're adapting, Mulaflaga yelled, the Akatsuki's golden armor scarred by plasma fire from infected elites. They aren't rushing the main corridors anymore. They're using the ventilation shafts to bypass our kill zones. They're trying to get above the orb dropships. Inside the mighty Strike Freedom, Kira Yamato felt as though he were drowning. The psychic resonance of the flood was a relentless, crushing weight. It wasn't just hunger anymore, it was a cold, calculating malice. He could feel the intelligence behind the swarm, shifting its pieces on the board. Kira locked his jaw, his violet eyes glowing with the hollow focus of the seed state. He could not use the high-energy beam rifles. The risk of structurally collapsing the ceiling on the UNSC Marines was too high. Instead, he relied on the Freedom's railguns. Twin streaks of hypersonic solid mass tore through the gloom, obliterating a cluster of infected hunters that were preparing to fire their fuel rod cannons at Lunamaria's force impulse. Kira, Lacus Klein's voice filtered through the heavy interference, a solitary beacon of calm in the dark. She was broadcasting from the Millennium, her voice laced with quantum encryption to bypass the biological static. I can feel the terror. Please, hold your mind steady. Do not let their chaos become your own. You must work together with the archaic humans. They understand this enemy. Lacus, they aren't just an enemy, Kira breathed heavily, his hands moving flawlessly to track targets. They're a hive, and it's getting smarter. All allied units, brace for kinetic impact. Cortana's voice suddenly dominated the comms. Mac round away in 3, 2, 1. The impact was not heard. It was felt in the marrow of their bones. Hundreds of meters above them, a 600-ton depleted uranium slug, traveling at hypersonic speed, smashed through the outer layers of Installation 5 and struck the primary intersection of the northern library quadrant. The megastructure groaned, a sound so deep and terrifying it felt as though the entire universe were tearing apart. A massive shockwave of displaced air and dust blasted through the subterranean corridors. The ceiling of the northern quadrant caved in entirely, bringing millions of tons of Forerunner alloy, ice, and rock crashing down. The avalanche of debris instantly crushed the main bulk of the flood migration column, burying tens of thousands of combat forms beneath an impenetrable wall of titanium. The mobile suits braced against the shockwave, their thrusters flaring to maintain balance. The UNSC Marines were thrown to the deck, coughing through the sudden, blinding dust storm. For a brief, miraculous moment, the corridor fell silent. The swarm had been cut off. Target destroyed, Cortana reported, her voice thick with processing lag. Migration column halted, but Commander keys the ring, it's reacting. Deep within the walls of the library, golden energy lines suddenly flared to life. The Forerunner architecture, which had been dormant or flickering, suddenly blazed with a blinding, aggressive luminescence. The ambient temperature of the cavern plummeted. What's happening? Agnes demanded, her giant Strom tracking the sudden surge in electromagnetic energy. The Mac strike triggered the installation's automated damage control city, Cortana said, her avatar glitching violently on Master Chief's HUD. But it's not just repairing the breach. It's activating the deep core containment protocols, and it's locking us in. Massive, energy-shielded bulkheads began slamming down across the remaining corridors, sealing off retreat paths. But the true horror was yet to come. Kira Yamato and Master Chief both snapped their attention toward the dust-choked ruins of the collapsed intersection. The biological signatures on their radars were not fading. They were converging. Cortana, Chief said, his voice deadly low. Readings. I don't understand, Cortana stammered, a profound digital terror in her voice. The biomass trapped beneath the rubble. It isn't dying, it's fusing. The neural pathways are linking at a geometric rate. It's broadcasting a massive, centralized command signal. In the dark of his cockpit, Kira's breath caught in his throat. The psychic noise of the swarm vanished, replaced by a single, colossal presence. It felt ancient, rotten, and horrifyingly lucid. Chief Kira, Cortana whispered, her voice barely audible over the hum of the awakening Forerunner systems. This is no longer an infection. It is an evolving war intelligence. From beneath the millions of tons of crushed alloy, a low, wet, and rhythmic thumping began to echo through the cavern. A gravemind was forming, and the fire of the ark had only forged it faster. Chapter 10: Schism and Shield. The library of Delta Halo was no longer a battlefield. It was an ecosystem of collapse. The tremendous kinetic shockwave from the UNSC's MAC bombardment had temporarily severed the primary flood migration column, but the cost was catastrophic. The ancient Forerunner architecture, roused from a 100,000-year slumber, was actively shifting to isolate the contagion. Massive, energy-shielded bulkheads slammed down across the subterranean grid, indiscriminately trapping UNSC Marines, Covenant warbands, and Gundam pilots in dark, spore-choked labyrinths. Aboard the amber-clad, the bridge was a cacophony of desperate, conflicting reports. The tactical holotank flickered erratically, projecting a fragmented, chaotic map of the ring's interior. "Commander, we've lost contact with Alpha and Charlie squads," the tactical officer reported, his voice tight. "The local Minovsky particle jamming from the Gundam reactors is compounding the Forerunner interference. We can't paint targets for orbital support." "We need to keep pounding the structural intersections," Miranda Keyes ordered, her hands gripping the table. "Calculate another MAC firing solution. We have to keep the infection bottled up down there." "Negative, Commander," Cortana's voice rang out, sharp and laced with an uncharacteristic synthetic edge. Her avatar, normally a calming blue, flashed with erratic pulses of warning crimson. "Another kinetic strike will not contain them. It will only shatter the remaining primary containment conduits. If those fail, the ring's automated security protocols will classify us as a Class 1 threat alongside the Flood. We will be purged." Keyes stared at the AI. "Then what do you suggest, Cortana? We are losing Marines by the minute." "Withdrawal of all remaining forces to the upper crust, followed by a scorched earth perimeter defense. A shield doctrine. But Commander, we can no longer coordinate with the Compass Fleet. Their command structure is fragmenting." On the bridge of the Millennium, the political and military cohesion of the Cosmic Era Alliance was fracturing under the impossible pressure of an alien biological war. "We cannot hold this position." Athran Zala's voice clipped over the comms from the Infinite Justice Type II. He was defending a massive, isolated causeway alongside 3 Orb Murasame units. "The Flood are adapting. They are using the wreckage of the Covenant dropships as mobile cover against our beam weaponry. We need to implement a structured, sweeping eradication protocol. Burn the biomass before it can consolidate." "No," Kira Yamato interjected, the mighty Strike Freedom holding a defensive line near a massive ventilation shaft. "If we initiate a total purge, we'll trigger the ring's automated defenses. The structural integrity is already failing. We have to maintain a defensive shield. Only fire to repel. We must preserve the architecture, or we'll bury ourselves." "Preserve the architecture," Shin Asuka screamed over the network. The Destiny Spec II was tearing through a horde of infected grunts with its anti-ship sword. "They are monsters, Kira. They're eating the Covenant alive. If we don't wipe them out now, they'll get to the surface. I'm pushing forward into the lower levels." "Shin, hold your position. That is an order," Athran barked. "You're not my commander here, Athran," Shin retorted, his voice raw with adrenaline and terror. The Destiny abruptly severed its quantum data link with the Millennium plunging deeper into the dark corridors, followed by a handful of aggressive ZAFT pilots. "Shin," Lunamaria Hawk cried out, her force impulse attempting to follow, but a sudden swarm of infection forms forced her back into a defensive posture. Aboard the Orb flagship, Chief Representative Kagali Eula Atha made the hardest decision of her life. The Orb fleet had taken heavy shield damage, and the internal sensors were beginning to pick up biological anomalies near their lower hangar bays. "Mew," Kagali transmitted, her voice trembling but resolute. "Recall the Murasamas. We are pulling back to a high-orbit holding pattern. Orb cannot risk total annihilation in a subterranean alien labyrinth." "Understood, Princess," Mula Flaga replied, the Akatsuki providing covering fire for the retreating Orb mobile suits. "But if we pull out, the central command grid collapses. The archaic humans won't be able to hold the line without our heavy beam support." "We cannot fight an enemy that feeds on our dead," Agnes Jebanrath stated coldly over the open channel, her giant Strom already ascending toward the surface. "Pragmatism dictates survival. Let the zealots and the archaic soldiers die in the dark. ZAFT forces form a defensive perimeter around the Millennium. Lacus Klein stood on the bridge of the super dreadnought, her heart breaking as she watched the tactical map dissolve into dozens of autonomous, isolated green and blue dots. The alliance had broken. It was no longer a unified war. It was a scramble for survival. In the depths of the library, the Master Chief was a solitary anchor of order amidst the collapse. "Sergeant, secure that bulkhead," Chief ordered, firing his magnum with methodical precision into the distended chest of a flood combat form. Sergeant Major Johnson slammed the manual override on a massive Forerunner door, sealing a squad of exhausted Marines inside a temporary safe room. "Doors locked, Chief, but we're cut off from the main extraction route. Comms are completely jammed." The Chief reloaded his weapon, his motion tracker displaying a chaotic sea of red dots moving above, below, and entirely around them. He was operating in complete autonomous mode. The strategic objectives of the UNSC were irrelevant now. His only mission was to keep the men behind the door alive. Suddenly, the heavy metallic thud of a mobile suit echoed through the corridor. A ZAFT GINN, separated from its squad, rounded the corner. Its optical sensors were cracked, and its massive machine gun was out of ammunition. "Hey, big guy," Johnson yelled into his helmet comms, hoping the pilot was monitoring short-range frequencies. "We got wounded in here, we need heavy cover." The GINN paused, its mono-eye flashing. Slowly, it knelt before the bulkhead, raising its massive physical sword to block the corridor. It didn't speak, but the intent was clear. In the absence of central command, the soldiers on the ground were forging their own desperate alliances. For the Covenant, the descent into madness was absolute. Without the rigid command of the prophets or the orbital superiority of their fleet, the Sanghili hierarchy shattered. In the vast, cavernous halls of the ring, different warbands clashed not only with the flood but with each other. "The Oracle has abandoned us," a minor elite screamed, firing his plasma rifle wildly into the shadows. A zealot stepped forward, striking the minor elite across the jaw. "Blasphemer, this is the great trial. The parasite is the fire that burns the unworthy. We must reach the Ascension Gate and ignite the ring." "Ignite the ring and kill us all," a Sanghili commander roared, stepping out of the gloom with a contingent of battle-hardened veterans. "The prophets lied. This is no divine path, it is a cage, and you are feeding the beast within it. Fall back and secure the phantoms." The zealot snarled, raising his energy sword. "Heretic." The two Covenant factions clashed violently in the dark, their plasma weapons illuminating the ancient Forerunner metal. And from the shadows, the flood watched, waiting for the victors to tire before consuming them both. Back in the upper levels, Kira Yamato maneuvered the mighty Strike Freedom through a series of massive, arched corridors. He was entirely cut off from Athron and Shin. The comms were a mess of static, alien roars, and the screaming of dying Marines. He was operating under his own shield doctrine, firing only to repel, using his physical shield to bash back the larger flood forms, desperately trying to minimize structural damage. But the psychic weight in his mind was changing. It was no longer the chaotic, ravenous hunger of an awakening swarm. The intelligence that had formed beneath the rubble of the Max strike was expanding its influence. It was probing the tactical network. "Kira," Cortana's voice suddenly whispered through a heavily corrupted channel. It didn't sound like the crisp AI. It sounded exhausted, hollowed out by processing impossible data. "Cortana, what's wrong?" Kira asked, engaging his CIWS to shred a cluster of infection forms. "The system." Cortana stammered. "Delta Halo. It's not just reacting to us anymore. It's reacting to it, the Gravemind, the intelligence node. It is attempting to interface with the Forerunner network." At that exact moment, Master Chief, miles away in a sealed corridor, watched as the golden Forerunner glyphs on the walls suddenly shifted to a sickly, necrotic green. The heavy, sealed blast doors across the facility did not open. They dissolved. The flood poured out not in a mindless wave, but in structured, tactical formations. They flanked the ZAFT GINN, holding the line for Johnson's Marines, using stolen Covenant plasma grenades to blow out its knee joints before swarming the cockpit. They bypassed Shin Asuka's aggressive purge, drawing him deeper into the labyrinth while cutting off his retreat. They ignored the fleeing Covenant factions, focusing entirely on the zealots attempting to reach the control rooms. Kira Yamato stopped the Freedom, his breath catching as the psychic scream in his mind suddenly went dead silent, replaced by a cold, overwhelming presence. "They're not disorganized," Kira whispered, the horrifying realization washing over him. In the dark of the corridor, Master Chief racked the slide of his magnum, staring at the perfectly coordinated swarm advancing toward the breached bulkhead. "No," Chief murmured to himself, his voice devoid of hope. The enemy was no longer divided. It was adapting to their division. The structure itself was being weaponized against them. The schism had only made them easier to consume. Chapter 11: The Proud and the Damned. The geometry of the library had fractured. It was no longer a forerunner tomb. It was a churning, multi-tiered crucible of biology and beam fire, where the ideologies of two universes went to die. The very air was thick with the suffocating stench of vaporized necrotic tissue, ozone from overstressed energy shields, and the copper tang of blood. Aboard the in amber clad, hovering desperately above the subterranean access shafts, Commander Miranda Keyes watched the tactical displays dissolve into a sea of red and gray static. The unified command structure had evaporated. The Cole Protocol, the chain of command, the tactical doctrine of the UNSC, it all felt small, insignificant against the sheer mass of the ancient contagion. "Commander, we have lost the MAC capacitors." The engineering officer screamed, a fire extinguisher spraying wildly across a sparking console. "The last orbital strike severed our primary coolant lines. We are venting atmosphere on decks 3 through 6. Seal the bulkheads, reroute power to the point defense turrets," Keyes ordered, her voice hoarse. "Cortana, can you re-establish contact with the surface teams? I need an extraction corridor for the Master Chief and Johnson." Cortana did not appear as her usual crisp holographic avatar. Her projection flickered, a jagged, fragmented array of code and corrupted blue light. Her voice was split, echoing with a chilling, dual resonance. "I am Commander, the subroutines are consuming the data pathways. The Gravemind, the central intelligence, it is not just directing the biomass. It is rewriting the Forerunner security protocols. It is locking the doors. It is turning the ventilation systems into spore conduits. The Ring Delta Halo is entering a primary activation cycle to purge the infection, but the infection is overriding the firing sequence." Keyes gripped the holotable. "Then we have to get our people out before either the ring fires or the flood breaches our hull. Broadcast a general retreat to all UNSC forces." Deep within the subterranean labyrinth, the retreat was already a slaughter. Master Chief John 117 moved like a machine stripped of all purpose save survival. His assault rifle barked in precise, mechanical bursts, severing the limbs of infected Sanghili that surged toward the retreating Marines. "Keep moving, do not let them close the gap," Sergeant Major Johnson bellowed, his armor scarred, his cigar long gone. He fired his battle rifle into a mass of infection forms crawling over a fallen Marine, but there were simply too many. The flood had ceased mindless wave attacks. They were executing perfect military flanking maneuvers. Combat forms with Covenant carbines laid down precise suppressing fire from the upper walkways, pinning the UNSC forces behind Forerunner pillars, while carrier forms slowly waddled into the choke points to detonate. A heavy, metallic thud shook the corridor. The ZAFT-GINN that had been holding their rear guard stumbled into view. Its massive physical sword was broken, its armor weeping hydraulic fluid and sparking erratically. It raised its empty machine gun in a desperate, futile gesture as a horde of flood forms swarmed its legs. "Chief," Johnson yelled, but before the Spartan could raise his weapon, the GINN's pilot engaged the self-destruct sequence. A blinding flash of thermal energy vaporized the machine and the surrounding biomass, collapsing the corridor behind them and buying the humans a few precious minutes. The chief didn't pause to mourn. He couldn't. Survival demanded absolute, ruthless efficiency. For the Gundam pilots, the ideological fracture was tearing them apart faster than the flood. "Shin, fall back," Athran Zala ordered, his voice laced with uncharacteristic desperation. The Infinite Justice Type II hovered near a massive, glowing Forerunner conduit, its beam sabers spinning to deflect incoming plasma fire from infected Covenant heavy weapons specialists. "You are cut off. If you push deeper, you will be consumed." "I can burn them all," Shin Asuka screamed over the comms, his voice cracking with borderline hysteria. The Destiny Spec II was miles away, deep in the lower containment levels. The machine was a blurring avatar of crimson light, its Palma Fiasana cannons and anti-ship sword devastating the flood swarms. If we retreat, they follow. We have to exterminate them at the source. There is no source, you fool. Agnes Jebenrath's voice sliced through the channel. Her giant Strom was already ascending the primary shaft alongside the remnants of the orb fleet. It is a distributed intelligence. You are fighting a Hydra by cutting off its fingers. Pull back to the Millennium or die in the dark. Agnes is right, Shin, Kira Yamato transmitted, his voice heavy with a profound, crushing sorrow. The mighty Strike Freedom remained stationed at the primary intersection, acting as a final shield for the retreating UNSC Marines and ZAFT stragglers. We cannot save this place. We can only save each other. Please, Shin, come back. But the psychic pressure of the Gravemind was exploiting Shin's rage. The young pilot was trapped in a feedback loop of trauma and aggression, lashing out at an enemy that had no face, no ideology, and no mercy. The Destiny Spec II plunged further into the abyss, its comms finally severing entirely. Athrun, Kira said, his violet eyes hollowed out by the sheer weight of the deaths he could feel echoing through the seed state. We have to abandon the lower levels. If we leave him, he dies, Athrun stated coldly, his tactical mind warring with his loyalty. But if I go after him, the defensive line collapses and the archaic humans perish. Kira, we have to hold the intersection. On the bridge of the Millennium Asterisk, Lacus Klein wept silently. The political maneuverings of Orb, the military doctrines of ZAFT, the peacekeeping mission of Compass, they were all ash. The universe was not political, it was existential. And in the face of the flood, they were all equally damned. Captain Ramius, Kagaliula Atha transmitted from her flagship, now safely in high orbit but heavily damaged. Orb forces are secure, but we are reading massive energy spikes from the ring's surface. It's not plasma, it's its forerunner energy. The entire structure is waking up. The Covenant had reached the absolute nadir of their faith. In a massive, vaulted chamber near the Ascension Gate, a Sanghili zealot knelt amidst a circle of dead grunts and minor elites. He was surrounded by a wall of flood combat forms, but they were not attacking him. They stood perfectly still, their necrotic faces twitching. The oracle is false, the zealot whispered, his energy sword deactivated in his hands. The prophets have led us into the maw of the beast. From the shadows, an infected elite, its jaw distended, its chest cavity glowing with parasitic light, stepped forward. But it did not roar. It spoke, its voice a horrific, gurgling approximation of Sanghili syntax, overlaid with the deep, rumbling intellect of the Gravemind. There is no great journey. There is only the monument to all your sins. The zealot screamed, igniting his sword and lunging at the creature, but he was torn apart in seconds. Across the library, the remaining Covenant forces had splintered into apocalyptic warbands. Some, driven entirely mad by the revelation of the flood, charged blindly into the swarms, seeking an honorable death. Others, pragmatic elite commanders, abandoned their holy mission entirely, commandeering phantoms to blast their way back to orbit, firing indiscriminately at UNSC, Gundam, and flood forces alike to secure their escape. The Holy Armada was dead. At the primary intersection, the final convergence began. Master Chief and Johnson's surviving Marines reached the extraction zone, taking cover behind the colossal legs of the mighty Strike Freedom. But the flood had anticipated this. From every ventilation shaft, every corridor, every shadow, the biomass poured forth. But they did not charge blindly. They moved in perfect, terrifying lockstep. Infected elites formed shield walls. Infected UNSC Marines provided covering fire. Carrier forms were used as strategic artillery, lobbing infection spores over the human defenses. They're using squad tactics, Johnson yelled, firing his battle rifle until the barrel smoked. Athrun, they're trying to flank the Marines. Kira called out, the Freedom's railguns tracking targets with blinding speed. I see them. Athrun replied, the Infinite Justice diving to intercept a massive wave of flood forms attempting to breach the eastern corridor. But as Athrun engaged, a massive deep-core rumble shook the entire Forerunner structure. The golden lighting of the intersections suddenly shifted to a harsh, blinding white. The ambient temperature dropped sharply. Massive, crystalline pillars began descending from the ceiling, humming with unimaginable power. Chief. Cortana shrieked, her avatar violently glitching, her voice layered with both synthetic panic and the deep, intrusive rumble of the Gravemind's interference. The ring. It's bypassing the index protocols. The internal defensive systems are entering a full-scale purge state. What does that mean? Keyes demanded over the comms. It means Delta Halo is activating its local sterilization grid. The entire lower atmosphere is going to be flash incinerated. Kira's eyes widened. He could feel it. The structure itself was no longer a passive battlefield. It was a living, breathing machine that had finally decided to amputate its infected limb. And everyone, UNSC, Covenant, Gundam, and Flood, was standing on the rot. All units, ascend now. Kira roared over the open network, the strike Freedom grabbing Master Chief and a cluster of Marines in its massive hands, its thrusters igniting with desperate fury. Athron's Justice rocketed upward, abandoning the defensive line as the Forerunner pillars began to emit a blinding, searing white light. The Flood swarms did not pursue them. The infected forms looked upward, their unified intelligence realizing that the cage had finally snapped shut. In Master Chief's helmet, Cortana's voice dropped to a terrifying, hollow whisper as the white light began to consume the cavern below them. This is no longer a battlefield, Chief. It is a system completing itself. As the Gundams and the surviving humans blasted upward through the primary shaft, the abyss below them erupted into absolute, annihilating light. The proud and the damned were burning together. Chapter 12, Freedom's Light. The sky of Installation 5 was no longer blue. It was a searing, incandescent white, threaded with veins of necrotic green. The Forerunner megastructure had reached its final operational phase. From the deep core library to the sprawling surface continents, the ring was humming, a low-frequency vibration that resonated in the marrow of every living being. The local sterilization grid was active, a curtain of cleansing fire sweeping upward from the subterranean depths to meet the orbital descent. At the center of this apocalypse lay the control room, a sprawling cathedral of hard-light bridges and ancient machinery. Here, the final convergence had begun. Perspective 1, the Master and the Machine. Inside the control room's primary transit corridor, Master Chief John 117 moved through a storm of combat. He was no longer fighting for a tactical objective, he was fighting for time. Cortana, status on the pulse, Chief barked, his battle rifle empty, transitioning to his combat knife to sever the sensory stalk of a Flood combat form that lunged from the shadows. The system is it's beautiful, John, Cortana's voice whispered. It was layered, 1,000 echoes of her own personality overlapping in a final, brilliant shimmer of rampancy and clarity. The Gravemind isn't just an infection, it's a biological mirror to the Forerunners. The ring doesn't fire to kill life, it fires to starve the mirror. It's a reset, a cosmic subtraction. Can we stop it? Stopping it isn't the point anymore. The index is already submerged in the core, but I can delay the final discharge long enough for the extraction. John, the Gundam pilots, they're pushing the Flood back from the teleportation spires. They're giving us the only window we have. Chief looked up through the vaulted ceiling's transparent alloy. High above, he saw the golden flare of the mighty strike Freedom, a solitary star against the encroaching green tide of the Flood-controlled Covenant cruisers. Sergeant Johnson, report, Chief transmitted. We're at the Pelican, Chief. Johnson's voice was ragged, punctuated by the thump of a shotgun. But the air is turning into a goddamn microwave. Those big mechs are holding the line, but they're taking a beating. Get your redundant green tail up here. Moving, Chief replied. He looked at the holographic terminal one last time. Cortana, come home. The blue avatar flickered, a sad, knowing smile touching her lips before she digitized into his neural lace. The weight of her data, and the terrifying truth of the halo, settled into his mind. Perspective 2, the Song of the World. In the cockpit of the mighty strike Freedom, Kira Yamato felt the world ending. The seed factor had expanded his consciousness until he could feel the entire ring. He felt the dying screams of the Covenant zealots below, the cold, calculating hunger of the Gravemind, and the flickering, defiant lives of the UNSC Marines. Athron, Shin. Kira's voice rang out across the unified channel, no longer a commander but a brother. The containment grid is closing. We have to synchronize our reactors. If we create a high-frequency antimatter field, we can punch a hole through the atmospheric lockdown. My reactor is at 105%. Shin Asuka roared. The Destiny Spec II was a battered wreck, one wing missing, its phase shift armor flickering. He had found his way back from the abyss, his rage replaced by a terrifying, cold focus. I'm not letting anyone else die here, not today. Infinite Justice, initiating synchronization, Athranzala announced. His machine was locked in a back-to-back formation with the in amber clad, his beam sabers creating a perimeter of light that no flood form could breach. Lacus, give us the frequency. Aboard the Millennium Lacus Klein stood at the center of the bridge. She was the anchor. Her voice, amplified by the ship's quantum array, bypassed the biological static of the flood. To all who can hear me, Lacus began, her voice a song of profound, tragic hope. Human, covenant, or those lost to the parasite, this war was born of fear, fear of the unknown, fear of the end. But the light we seek is not found in weapons or rings. It is the choice to hold on to each other when the world falls silent. Kira, now. The three Gundams, Freedom, Justice, and Destiny ignited their engines in a perfect triangular formation. The nuclear reactors surged, their outputs interlinking. A pillar of pure golden light erupted from the center of their formation, piercing through the necrotic green clouds and the Forerunner suppression field. Freedom's light, Kira shouted. The beam did not strike an enemy. It carved a path. It was a corridor of escape for the in amber-clad Asterisk, the Millennium, and the surviving orb transports. Perspective 3, the final schism. Below them, on the fractured bridges of the Covenant remnants, the shipmaster of the Sangheli looked up at the golden pillar of light. They do not seek the great journey, the shipmaster whispered, watching the human machines sacrifice their power to save a primitive frigate. They seek the next day. He turned to his bridge crew, his mandibles set in a grim, newfound respect. Disengage the holy lances. Focus all fire on the flood-controlled carriers. If the humans are to escape this cage, let the Sangheli be the ones to bar the door for the parasite. The Covenant schism reached its final, silent resolution. The warriors of the elites turned their back on the prophets, lies, choosing the honor of a doomed defense over the madness of a false ascension. The resolution, the choice within. The Halo system completed its sequence. A blinding, sapphire pulse of energy radiated from the core of the ring, sweeping across the surface in a silent, beautiful wave. It was the reset. Every biological entity not protected by the internal stasis fields or the high-frequency shields of the Gundams was instantly atomized. The Gravemind's physical manifestations withered into ash, the central intelligence forced back into a dormant, microscopic state. Inside the mighty Strike Freedom, Kira watched the sapphire wave wash over the ringworld. His phase shift armor died. The golden joints went dark. The machine drifted in the sudden, absolute silence of the vacuum. The Millennium and the in amber-clad had breached the atmosphere, their engines straining as they hit the coordinates for a blind slipspace jump, guided by Cortana's final, desperate calculations. Kira looked out through the panoramic monitors. The Halo hung in the void, a silent, silver monument to a cycle that had repeated for millions of years. Master Chief's voice crackled through a dying, short-range channel. One final handshake between two titans of war. Kira Yamato. I'm here, Chief. You told your president that you fight for the next day. Make sure you find it. We will, Kira replied, a lone tear tracing a path through the dust on his face. And you, what will you do? I'll finish the fight. The in amber-clad vanished into the blue rupture of slipspace. A moment later, the Millennium engaged its own warp drive, disappearing into the stars of the cosmic era. The crossover was over. The anomaly had closed. Epilogue. Space returned to its cold, indifferent silence. Installation 5 spun slowly in the shadow of the gas giant, its continents now gray and sterile, its biological fire extinguished. The flood remained, locked in the deep dark, waiting for the next cycle. The Covenant was a memory. In their respective universes, both Kira Yamato and John 117 would return to their wars. They would face new enemies, deeper betrayals, and the unrelenting weight of command. But they would carry a truth that no system could erase. Freedom was not the absence of the ring, nor the absence of the war. It was the moment in the dark when a Spartan and a coordinator looked at a dying world and chose to save a life that wasn't their own. The light of freedom would never truly fade, for it was not a weapon. It was the choice made within the system, the choice to remain human. End of Saga. Chapter E, Epilogue, Ashes of the Ark. Installation 5 did not sing the song of the galaxy's end. The blinding, sapphire pulse of the Forerunner containment grid had washed across the megastructure, but it had not achieved the catastrophic critical mass required for a full-scale galactic sterilization. Instead, the system, damaged by Mach bombardments, nuclear resonance, and internal paradoxes, had locked itself into a violent emergency dormancy. The infected subterranean corridors had been flash incinerated, the surface ecosystems reduced to fractured, smoking ruins. Delta Halo was no longer a battlefield. It was a silent, festering wound in the fabric of reality, and in the cold, indifferent vacuum of slipspace, the survivors fled the ashes. They were not the armies that had arrived. They were fragments, scarred, traumatized, and forever altered by the revelation of the abyss. The flood had not been destroyed. As the remaining Allied sensor nets cast their sweeps backward through the collapsing slipspace anomalies, the horrifying truth became mathematically undeniable. The Gravemine's physical manifestation had been crippled, but the intelligence itself had fragmented. It had seeded microscopic spores and corrupted data packets into the slipspace wake. The parasite was no longer confined to Installation 5. It had transformed into a latent, interstellar survival algorithm. It was dispersed in the dark, and it was waiting. The Covenant, too, was forever broken. The Sanghili commanders who had survived the descent looked back at the silent ring not with reverence, but with a cold, shattering clarity. The Great Journey was an extinction protocol. The prophet of regret's theological empire dissolved into an ideological echo, his voice replaced by the bitter, pragmatic commands of elite warlords. They splintered into independent warbands, the broken faith warshards. Some fled into the unknown to die in denial. Others embraced a new, furious militarism, swearing vengeance against the prophets who had lied to them. The Holy Armada had become a diaspora of rage. Aboard the heavily damaged Super Dreadnought * Millennium, the survivors of the cosmic era formed a new, desperate paradigm, the Free Blade Coalition. There was no more Orb Union neutralism, no more ZAFT supremacy, no more compass idealism. There was only the continuity of the human species. Chief Representative Kagali Eula Atha worked tirelessly in the command center, securing the survival of the civilian evacuation fleets and preserving the fragile political sovereignty of her people. Agnes Jebanrath stood beside her, her arrogance replaced by a cold, analytical dread. She processed the catastrophic data from the ring, converting the horror of the flood and the Covenant diaspora into predictive survival models. In the hangars, the mobile suits were no longer weapons of political enforcement. They were the ultimate containment tools. Mula Flaga acted as the vital operational coordinator, bridging the tactical doctrines of the cosmic era with the hardened, archaic survival warfare of the UNSC. Athran Zala took command of the ZAFT and Orb tactical remnants. His infinite justice was repaired not for ship-to-ship combat, but for rapid response anti-flood preparedness. He forged his pilots into a disciplined, ruthless survival unit. And at the spearhead of that unit was Shin Asuka. The Destiny Spec II had been painted with the scorch marks of the library. Shin had transformed from an angry, traumatized soldier into the Coalition's frontline extermination specialist, the blade of last resort, ready to burn the contagion wherever it took root. Yet, it was Lacus Klein who held the fractured Coalition together. Through the ship's quantum network, she established an emotional and ideological stabilization grid, her voice a soothing balm over the raw, bleeding psychological wounds of her people. She reminded them that survival was not merely about drawing breath, it was about preserving their humanity in the face of monsters. And at her side stood Kira Yamato. The mighty Strike Freedom sat in its gantry, its golden joints dim, its pilot exhausted. But Kira had become something greater than the ultimate coordinator. He was the symbolic leader of the preservation doctrine. He had stared into the maw of galactic consumption and chosen to protect the light. Sailing in parallel through the chaotic slipspace corridor was the UNSC in amber clad, its titanium hull scorched and bleeding atmosphere from a dozen sealed decks. They were the last light remnants. Commander Miranda Keyes stood at the holodable, her uniform stained with soot. She had initiated the long-range fleet regroup protocol, broadcasting encrypted pings into the dark to gather whatever UNSC forces remained. Below decks, Sergeant Major Johnson moved among the wounded Marines, a hardened anchor of ground-level leadership. He kept their weapons clean and their spirits unbroken, binding the fractured units with sheer, unyielding grit. In the ship's armory, Master Chief Petty Officer John 117 stood in the dim light. He was the final active Spartan field commander in the sector, a walking titan who had survived the descent into hell. But the victory was entirely hollow. He carried the fragmented, terrifying intelligence of the Flood's evolution and the Halo's activation logic. He was no longer just a soldier, he was the UNSC's living weapon, a symbol of an unfinished, apocalyptic war. Chief. Cortana's avatar materialized on the armory pedestal. She was severely destabilized. Her blue light rippled with erratic, violet static, and her code stuttered with the immense, traumatic weight of her exposure to the Forerunner systems and the Gravemind's logic. She retained her consciousness, but only in fragments. She had become an unpredictable, terrifyingly lucid strategic intelligence. "I am detecting a resonance," Cortana whispered, her voice echoing with a haunting duality. "A Forerunner carrier wave. It's bleeding across the slipspace boundaries. The Gundam systems are picking it up too. The Covenant relics are reacting to it." Chief approached the holotank. "Can you isolate it?" "I have," Cortana replied, her avatar looking up at him with a heartbreaking, fractured clarity. "It never ended, John. It only dispersed." The Master Chief gripped his assault rifle. He had known it the moment the ring went silent. The parasite cannot be eradicated, only delayed or redirected. Across the quantum link bridging the two human flagships, the leaders of the cosmic era listened to the Spartans' grim assessment. "Survival is not victory," Kira Yamato's voice responded, soft but carrying the immense weight of the seed. "But it is the continuity of choice. We chose to live today, so we can fight tomorrow." "And tomorrow's fight will be different," Athran Zala added, his tone laced with military absolute. "Future wars will not be ideological, they will be existential." Lacus Klein closed her eyes, the starlight from the viewport casting a pale glow across her face. "We cannot run from this cycle. Humanity must learn to coexist with inevitability, not deny it. If the universe is a cage, then we must be the ones to forge the key." The fractured fleet violently dropped out of slipspace, the swirling blue vortex collapsing behind them into the cold, black canvas of normal space. The in amber clad, and the Millennium drifted side by side, their engines cooling. They had escaped the arc, but as the navigation computers established their stellar position, the final, terrifying reality of the cosmos unveiled itself. The consoles on both bridges suddenly blazed with blinding, golden Forerunner telemetry. Unknown Forerunner signal reactivation. Coordinate lock, Earth vector detected. Secondary Halo response network, active. A dead, suffocating silence fell over the fleets. Aboard the battered UNSC frigate, Master Chief stood motionless, his golden visor reflecting the terrifying alphanumeric coordinates. Aboard the Orb superdreadnought, Kira Yamato stared at the exact same data stream, his violet eyes narrowing. The war did not end at the Ark, the Covenant diaspora, the latent flood algorithm, the Forerunner activation signals. They were not fading into the dark. They were converging on the birthplace of humanity. The war had only changed theaters. Cortana's fragmented voice, overlapping with the dying, ancient hum of the Forerunner network, broadcasted a final, unified system message across the surviving fleets. It was a command, a warning, and a promise all at once. Reclaim, resist, rebuild.